We're live? Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. It's 6 p.m. I will call to order the meeting of Beaumont Regular City Council meeting, Tuesday, November 28th, 2023, here at 6 p.m. in City Hall in our chambers here. We begin every meeting with land acknowledgement, which I'll do at this time. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all First Peoples of the land, whether they be a First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich vibrant communities across the land. As we gather here in Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis Nation, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people and have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor the treaty, the inherent rights of the people, and the land. We'll begin with an adoption of the agenda. Please have the motion put on the screen. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to this evening's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, we do not have any changes to this agenda.
Thank you. Please put the motion on the screen to adopt the agenda as presented. Member of Council willing to move that motion? Councilor McCook, Kat, you have the floor.
Oh, never mind, Mayor. Sorry, I'm going to do it at consent agenda. Just realized.
Okay, we're doing the agenda right now. We'll get the consent
Yeah.
in a moment.
I can move
Yes,
that
please.
the November 28th,
Please continue.
2023 council agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you, Councilor. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Council, would you please vote on the adoption of the agenda? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Council. Next agenda is open forum. Madam Clerk, any open forum this evening?
No, Mr. Mayor, we do not have any open forum presentations this evening.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next agenda is the consent agenda. Would you please put the consent agenda on the screen, please? And I will ask for a motion from member of council to adopt consent agenda or make any changes they wish to make the consent agenda. Councilor McCook, you have the floor, Kat.
Thank you, Mayor. Now it's my turn. I'd like to please remove number 7.3 off the consent agenda, the traffic safety bylaw, loud vehicle noise.
7.3.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any further changes to consent agenda from any members of council? Seeing none, I'll ask for members of council to vote on the consent agenda as amended. Oh, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, it's traditional to have the clerk read the consent items just for clarity.
Please do.
Thank you.
Ahead of myself there today.
No problem. So for the consent item, we have the regular council meetings from November 14th, 2023. So approval for those meetings, approval for the November 21st special council meeting minutes. We have item 7.2 that the November 28th, 2023 report capital projects update be received for information. 7.4 community standards bylaw construction waste that the November 28th, 2023 community standards bylaw construction waste report be received as information. 7.5 update to council policy C38 supporting artistic and cultural expression that the updated policy C38 supporting artistic and cultural expression as set out in attachment 1 of the November 28th, 2023 report be approved. And finally, the regional dashboard update that the November 28th, 2023 regional initiatives update report be received as information and that the report remain private pursuant to Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act sections 21 and 24. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That's quite a mouthful, but I do appreciate that. Councilor Barnard, you wish to make a comment on the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm slow at mentioning this one. 7.5, I would like to exempt as well from the consent agenda.
Madam Clerk, we okay to do that? After you've read the motion, we're okay with that?
Haven't voted yet.
Thank you. So 7.5 will also accounts be taken off the consent agenda. All right, that leaves the consent agenda as presented on the screen. Member of council willing to move the motion for the amended consent agenda. Councilor Barnhart. Kathy, you have the floor.
Yes, Mayor, I will move move that council consent to approve the following. Do I have to read it again, Madam Clerk? No. The amended consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Discussion on the motion, members of council? Seeing none, council, please vote on the amended consent agenda before you. That carries unanimously. Thank you, council. Next on our agenda, going down here, I'm seeing 6.1 registered presentations, Beaumont District Heritage Society. Would our guest speaker please join us at the table in front of me here? Let me get the microphone going for you. Give me 1 second here. Okay, your microphone is on, Ms. Hudson. Please introduce yourself, and you have 10 minutes to make your presentation. We'll have a few questions afterward. We'll try and keep it to 10 or 12 minutes in total, please. Whenever you're ready to start, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Carol Hudson. I'm the president of the Beaumont and District Heritage Society. The main purpose of being here today is to give you an update because, of course, the city has been involved in this project, not just ourselves. And so the PowerPoint that I presented here, I'm going to test this out here. I need to figure out how to get the next slide here going. Okay. Okay, so since 2018, when we moved the house, we have a 10-year lease with the city. And after the house was moved, we received $15,000 grant that was approved back by council in 2012. Council has approved another 3 years of this particular grant. And then last year, we also received, or for this year, we've received another $15,000, which is a totaling $75,000 financial support for the society. In the earlier years, we were told that we were allowed to use the grant to help pay for the construction, but we eventually did get utilities on the site. Over the past 2.5 years, it has paid for the utility services and everything, and now paying everything. We have all the utilities and everything in place. When the facility does open, we'll of course use it to help pay for mowing the lawn and doing snow removal. I'm kind of wondering how to get rid of that little window in the side. Okay, thank you. Besides doing the upgrading and the renovations, we've had other expenses that we didn't anticipate. And these are just some of the items. And I'm sure you've read this through anyways. The city has also contributed, besides the other grants, money to help us build the picket fence. And the residents did definitely enjoy that. They much prefer the picket fence. And we did have the city helping with the lawn. Some topsoil has been brought. And most recently, we were approved for a $7,000 matching grant for the handicap walkway. These pictures here shows work that actually has already been completed. There's been repairs made in the attic and that, but it just gives you an idea of what we were working with to start with. And we're eventually going to get the handrails and all these things put in within the next month. So these are just a list of some of the items, nitty-gritty little stuff. Actually, we've gotten a little further. We've got some of the electrical upstairs now, just this last week. So sponsorship, this is how we kind of pay for things. We had a matching grant from the province way back in 2012. And then a grant from the province again. And we're still working on that. That's to pay for the tables, chairs, computers, all those things that are going into the facility. Our best fundraiser that we had was our DVD. We still have a number of them. I don't know how many of you have seen the DVD. If you don't have a copy yet, they're $25 and they're really awesome. It took us from 2012 to 2018, all those years to write the script, put it together, and it's just, anyways. Now, this is the most recent fundraiser that we've got. This is the boards for the walkway. And this sample board here has the name of Stephanie McIntosh. She's a member of a society, but she passed away from breast cancer. And so I'm paying for a board for her name to be on there. And so for those who are for memorials, there will be a special font. For regular folks, there'll be otherwise. And I'm encouraging everyone on council and actually anyone and everyone in this room, if you'd like to have a board, please do so. That will help us pay the money to match the $7,000 grant from the city to pay for the walkway. We've had lots of on-site hours of volunteers. This is an example of the LDS missionaries helping bring the lumber in for the basement before it was done. Myself and Harry Zuzak, we do the bulk of the volunteering, hours and hours and hours, but we have other people helping us with painting the basement. And this is my daughter, Linda, who passed away this year. She came and helped to paint. So we have a plan for the outside area. The biggest area of concern that we have is parking lot. It's the biggest pricey item and we still don't have a sponsor for it. Is the biggest reason why we need financial help with that. So that's the original drawing that was provided by Classic Landscapes. They're providing all the plants, trees, flowers for us. And this next picture is going to be different. It's going to show the walkway going a different way because we've had to modify it. And it's a side view, but this is the way the walkway will go. And so we have all these elevations all figured out by our volunteer engineer who's 84, 85. I'm not sure how old Harry is, but he's done a lot of work for us. Now this is our goal, is to have a big party for Heritage Day or someday nearby. The first picture is the house on the site the first winter. The next picture is from last winter, and I've doctored the photograph to make that little brown because I still have to paint that on the bottom of the building when we're done. This is a slideshow. So this is when we got the house there. One of the expenses we didn't anticipate was having to cut so much of the stucco off to get to the rotted wood to change the sill plate that's resting on the basement foundations. That was a pricey thing for us, but we eventually got the stucco on there that cost us $9,000. The kitchen was in so-so shape when it got there. There's a few cracks and things, but we had to take some of the walls apart in the kitchen because the house has never been insulated. So this is what the kitchen looks like now, repainted, all the cupboards and everything all back on. Master bedroom, we did a lot of work in there, and we're going to preserve part of the wallpaper that was there, the floors and everything. This is what it looks like now. And actually we took off the tarp and the blue mats. So the wood floor is now exposed. We're starting to bring the furniture up today. This is what the other bedroom on the main floor looked like. The family had used it for laundry and bathroom area. And then we cut a hole, put an elevator in and a handicap washroom right beside. In the living room, ripped out the carpets there and took off the flooring, scraped it up, and then repainted the walls and everything after the insulation. And that's what the wood floor looks like. It's just gorgeous. So we had a volunteer who did the wood floors for the 2 rooms, and he didn't charge us anything. He just wanted to help us out. The basement, this is what it used to look like. They needed a lot of concrete in there to keep their foundation holding together. This is the new basement. That's the extended 12 feet that makes the basement bigger than the house. That's the family history room with some of the computers, and we have the internet there already, the new office computer and the office that's underneath the extension. We have a kitchenette there down there as well. This is off where the 2 washrooms and the utility room are. Now we do have some areas that are not sponsored yet. That's how we've raised a lot of our money. So the utility room, we're looking for a donor of $2,000 to sponsor the utility room. We're looking for $2,500 to sponsor the kitchenette. So if you know of anybody who'd like to do that, that will help us out. And the parking lot, well, no, there's also the attic upstairs. It's for $5,000. This is the activity room. I've been moving most of that furniture out today so we can have groups rent the facility with a big flat screen TV. We'll get that. The upstairs, we're working on all of the repairs up there. The boys' bedroom has been repainted, and the girls' room has been repainted. It's not finished here, but it is done. This is the outside. We've redone the front steps. Where the parking lot is supposed to be was this mess for the last several years, but now this is what we have. The compact clay is there, so it shouldn't cost us quite as much next year to finish off the parking lot. And this is progression for the walkway. So these boards are the boards that we're going to engrave people's names on. We talked as a board, and it was suggested that we ask council if maybe we could possibly get a $50,000 grant to help us just finish it off. Maybe we'll be able to raise some of the money that we need, but probably not all of it. If we did receive a grant such as this, then we could use some of the money for the party that we want to have as well, you know, if there's some money left over. And next year we will be applying to continue the $15,000 a year operating grant. We know this is considerably lower than like whatever the budget is for the youth center and some of these other things. But the facility will be for everybody of all ages. Now here, an update on the Magnan House. The next slide is a movie slide. So you'll see a little bit of movement if you watch carefully. So this is the final step of bringing the house out to its new foundation. So I was there for hours and my phone and everything was running out of juice, so I only got to, it was so cold out. But we finally got this house, so this is good news for the city. It'll eventually be fixed up and everything next year. It will not be a museum facility, it will be an office for the Ag Society. He almost got his clover caught in there. And this is what the house looks like almost today. Today it now has everything boarded up so nobody can get in underneath. And that's my thank you. I hope that wasn't any more than 10 minutes.
Actually, you were just 8.5, not too bad at all. Yes,
Awesome.
awesome.
Couldn't tell.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hudson. Appreciate the presentation. With that, we'll open the questions from members of council. We'll try and keep it to 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of questions possibly, and we'll go from there. Anybody have any questions to begin our conversation? Councillor Barnhart. Kathy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Carol, for coming in and for all you're doing. It's a tremendous amount of work, and your passion to stay with it this long is amazing. Yeah, and I think the community is very lucky to have you for more reasons than just this, just keeping our history, keeping us in a place where we can remember our history and recognize it and celebrate it. So I do appreciate that. I want to clarify the grants. This could be a typo on one of the pages. It said that we originally received the 15,000 grant in 2012.
It was approved in 2012, but we got it in 2018.
Oh,
It was
okay.
conditional for the house. Well, it wasn't originally conditional, but it took that long to
That's
get
what
the
it was.
house moved, so.
I knew you wouldn't make a typo. You're too careful to
Yeah.
look after the details. So thank
I
you for
could have
that.
made a typo easily.
No, it just didn't, I didn't remember that. The other question I had was regarding your ask, which I understand. Just want to be clear on process. So the $50,000 you're looking for is a capital request, which would, of course, council would have to, well, maybe it's not, it's a grant request, so that's in operating, but council would have to look at that at budget debate.
Yeah.
You did say you would be applying for the 15,000? So you're looking at applying through the community grant program?
Yes, for next year, we will be applying to have that continue, the 15,000 each year for 3 years. I understand that the process has changed, and so we will be applying for
You're
that
able
the
to apply
official
again.
way. This 50,000 is separate, just in case there's a possibility. But
Okay.
council might.
So that's a more timely request. The 50,000 is at a stage where you want to
Yeah, the
finish the
15,
project.
yeah.
All right, well, thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newkirk, followed by Councillor Penrod. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I do think you made a typo in there because you said hundreds of hours that you and Harry put in, but I bet you you're into the thousands. So.
Well,
but
this year
we're
it's
splitting hairs.
546 so far.
There you go. You betcha. No, thank you for
For
all all the work you do. And I know that you won't tire and you're gonna keep going. Excuse me. What portion of the 50,000 is going to help with the exterior versus interior?
The
as you-
majority of it.
So most of the 50,000 will be to really get the exterior buttoned up.
Yes.
And I think the community will enjoy it all buttoned up, right? And
Yes.
one of the things that this year was able to keep under control pretty well was the tidiness and stuff outside. So do
Yes.
appreciate that as well. And yeah, at budget time we can talk about the 50,000. So once again, thank you for all of the time that you put in, and thanks to all the other volunteers as well. So
Thank you. I could make actually, we basically need help to pay for that parking lot because we got to put the parking lot in to get the landscaping in. That all got held up this year. And I mean, if we can get us, if the city has some of the materials we need to make a parking lot, like gravel and this, that, and everything, that can help because the city did contribute some loads of topsoil. That did help us.
Mhm.
There's other ways than just money if we
Yeah.
can get assistance.
yeah, there's some opportunities for in-kind. Yeah, okay.
But the parking lot is the big problem.
So the parking lot needs to be done,
Mhm.
and that will trigger the rest of the classic
Yes,
landscape
because we
install.
can't finish the elevations. And until we finish the elevations, we can't do the rest of the walkway.
Yeah, so that's the big hurdle.
Yeah.
So there's the big piece that
Yeah.
requires a lot of dollars. and then the rest can follow after that, including the donated material, plant material, to execute that plan. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just thanks for helping frame that, I think, because it's important for council to know that
Yes.
this doesn't tighten up until that piece is finished,
Mhm.
and that's where it starts. So thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Penrod, you have the floor. Philip?
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk, and thank you for the presentation, Carol. I just commend to anyone who hasn't had the chance to visit, you arrange a visit with you over at the site at the St. Jacques House. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak a little bit more about the family history room, because that's a piece you just kind of glossed over a little bit. And I've had the opportunity to hear a bit more of your kind of long-term vision for that. Just wonder if you take the opportunity to speak to how that could be a bit of a draw to Beaumont for people from outside of the city.
Okay, so the family history room is actually my favorite room because I've been doing family history for a long time, and I've actually neglected my own because I've been involved in Beaumont's history. We have 2 computer systems that were donated. We have the internet there. We're going to try to get access through Family History Library through Salt Lake City, that we will have access on the computers. And so when individuals come to use the facility, there will be no charge. We can't charge if we're going to have partnership with Salt Lake City. We have to, and we were never going to anyways. So individuals of any race, ethnicity, whatever, can come and try to do their family history work. And when we can try to help people to figure out how to do this. And we feel that there'll be people of all ages who want to use the facility for that reason alone, which is the reason why we needed to have a handicap elevator, which was a costly item of 26,000, because the basement floor is going to be the busiest of the house, just because people are going to be down there doing that. And, for family reunions, things like that, it could be helpful as well.
Yeah, so thanks for speaking to that. And you also mentioned and pointed out the meeting room downstairs.
Yes.
And so I just want people to keep this community resource, as we get some of the buttoning up done, as Councillor Van Newkirk had mentioned. These are resources coming on stream for the
Mhm.
community to use, right? And we all know what a premium meeting space is in our little city. So look forward to working with you to bring this project to completion. And I'll have August 5th, 2024 in my calendar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Penrod. Any further questions, members of council, for our presenter? Seeing none, on behalf of council, Ms. Hudson, thank you for coming. Great presentation, and we look forward to discussing this at a future time. Thank you for coming this evening. Appreciate that. And Madam Clerk, I'm just looking at the clock. It's 6:22. We have our presenters here for 6:30 closed session. I'm going to recommend, if you're okay, we ask Mr. DeBlanco for a little bit of latitude on his presentation and go right to our closed session. Madam Clerk, any concerns with doing that?
No.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to go into closed session. We'll have our presenters come in closed session before us in a moment. Here we'll get started. So Madam Clerk, you put the motion on the screen when you have a moment, and I'll ask a member of council to move us into closed session. Councilor Penrod, would you make that motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council move into closed session pursuant to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, sections 21 and 24 at 6:22 p.m.
Thank you. Councilor, discussion on the motion, members of council. Seeing none, council, would you please vote on the motion to move into closed session? That carries unanimously. Thank you, council. We will just take one moment to get ourselves organized. Good evening. We are back live now in open session after our closed session. There may be a motion coming from our closed session. This time, Madam Clerk, is there a motion to come forward from our closed session on sub-regional transit?
Mr. Mayor, I believe there may be a motion, but is there desire for more conversation amongst council?
I'm prepared to do the motion first, if you like. Sure, let's do the motion. Yeah, let's do the motion first.
Just need a moment.
No problem. Actually, before we proceed with that, Madam Clerk, is it advisable to maybe ask any open questions of our presenters first, then do the motion? Perhaps we should probably do that rather than do the motion first. I think.
Mr. Mayor, that would be just fine.
Okay, I'll reverse my original thought. I will now open up for members of council questions for our presenters in open session, then I'll entertain a motion thereafter. So with that, I'll go to Councilman Cook first of all. Pat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. And forgive me if this is somewhere in the report. If we do not go with on demand, is there more than one stop within Beaumont? For just the regular, I guess, commuter?
I think for now, it is just the Chemicals Hydration Center to stop there.
The what, sorry?
It is just one stop in Chemicals, yeah, for now.
And is there an opportunity
But
to
if-
add?
Yeah, but if council, probably we can work with Kevin to see whether there is any other convenience, because we don't want to add too much time.
Correct,
Because time is
yeah.
money. And see whether there is anywhere that is convenient for transit, bus stop or whatever.
Bus stop. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Natellis. Nathan, you have the floor.
Thank you. I guess just a couple of questions. First one, starting off with the negative correlation I'm seeing. So I just want clarification, I guess, more so with your experience within the industry. I'm just looking at the numbers that had been presented in terms of ridership. And back in 2018, within the Beaumont system, there was significant ridership, which decreased well over 80% into 2023. Now, I do understand there was a reduction of service, so I'll go back a year to 2022, where it's about 75% reduction in ridership. My concern here is we saw about a population increase of about 4,000 individuals in that time frame, yet we saw a 75% reduction in ridership. Is this an ongoing trend? Are you able to kind of provide some insights with your experience as to how transit is trending?
Yeah, the trend that you saw, and then a lot of transit agencies in Canada saw, was COVID played a major impact in ridership. And I believe in Beaumont, service was reduced to 0 during a certain portion. So that would significantly, you're not running service, you won't have ridership. So, the more service you put in, the riders will come back. Currently in Leduc, we are seeing approximately about 110% recovery over pre-COVID numbers. So the riders are coming back and demanding more service.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I guess I just a little confused in terms of our numbers, because we're definitely not seeing that 100% ridership. If I'm looking back at 2018, even 2019, I see reduction in service in 2021. 2020 as well as 2021. When we're back to full service or close to it in 2022, we're still well below our initial ridership. So that to me is just a little bit concerning in terms of the product that we have right now. I'm also quick to state I have taken our transit, and right now it doesn't work for many reasons. So we do have to evaluate other options if we are continuing with transit, that's for sure. So I do appreciate the report and what has come from that. I do believe that is all I have for you. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilor. Appreciate that. Clarifying questions. Councilor Barnhart. Kathy, you have the floor, followed by Councilman Newkirk.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, thank you, gentlemen, for the report. On the on-demand, I wanted to pursue that a little bit further, and following up a bit on Councilor McCook's question. The whole idea of time is money, I certainly get that. And I think I know the answer to this question, but I just want to make sure I do. The buses we currently have that are doing the back and forth to Edmonton, are they able to go on the ring road, or do they have to stay because of their size on 50th?
I think they can run on the ring road, but the ring road is not complete. That is the issue, because sometimes somewhere there is the road is dead end and they have to turn around. So that may be the issue with the smaller bus.
So I'm talking about the inner ring road. Are you talking about the outer ring road?
Oh, the inner ring road. I would believe it can run, but
It is possible to have one of the buses.
but it
go?
is cost efficient to run a 40-footers on an inner ring road for local transit. But that is another question.
So, and I think that's the part that I don't think we've seen those numbers in terms of the cost of the on-demand. It's very compelling to have that service, but at the same time, what's the cost of that
Mhm.
versus having one or two more stops where people could get to closer to their homes? It's difficult to get to places in Beaumont on foot. I
Okay.
get that.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering if we'd considered, because I have had residents reach out to me and say, what about, having a bus go around the ring road and having stops there instead of just at Ken Nickel?
Yeah, for sure, we can run I think, run the bus in the inner ring road, but then it will add to the service time if you are using the same bus to run the commuter routes. Because once you come to Chemicals and then you run the ring road before you move on to Edmonton International Airport, for example, and the ring road, I don't know how much time you will travel a loop. It will add, for example, if it is 10-15 minutes, you add 10-15 minutes to your frequency.
Yeah, I get that, but I'm wondering whether that cost is less than the cost of
Oh,
having the
okay.
whole
Yeah,
on-demand service. That's,
Mhm.
and you don't know that at this
I
point.
don't know that.
Okay.
Maybe Kevin is.
I can
Maybe
add
another,
that to my list of things to do.
another thing to put into your computer to see what it comes out. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councilman Newkirk, followed by Councillor McCoy-Swain. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm interested to know a little bit of a few of your observations as you brought the system that currently exists for Leduc Transit to life. So when you brought the traditional transit model with the routes and the stops to life, did that come to life ahead of on-demand and on-demand added in later?
Correct. We added fixed routes first and then
Yeah.
came in September of 2021.
Okay, and so September 2021 so that time period onward, when you added the on-demand, what type of an effect did you see on ridership to the the stop model? Did you start seeing was the on-demand contributing into the stop model, or was the on-demand used more to travel within the community?
Bit of both. When we decided on an app developer for our program, so Rideco is our company that we use. One of the things that we had built in or requested that they do was an arrive by time. So, you'd be able to book your trip and arrive at the Alex Arena to connect with the commuter route or the service going to the airport. That was critical because, you can book an arrive at time, but you may not get to the location where the bus is in time, and then you're standing there for 30 minutes. So that was critical. The on-demand has increased our ridership throughout the system. We're getting riderships throughout the community. In our industrial park in particular, and in Nisku as well, there was a lot of locations we never went to with fixed routes. So in the Leduc Business Park, 45th Street is where the bus went. So anything east of that, there was no service. And now we're servicing all those businesses in that area. And same with Nisku, we're going into places we never did before. So people would find other ways to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So on-demand has increased our ridership.
Yeah. And the reason I'm asking that is because, there may not be funds in this budget to do any transit, or there might be to bring in, the traditional transit, or there might be to bring in traditional transit and on demand. So, I guess what I'm hearing is that, it would be okay if we could do one without the other at this time, but, bolting on demand is going to add to the traditional transit routing volumes in the future.
Yeah, and for us, if the technology was at the place it is now, back when we started in 2014, I would have gone straight with on-demand and skipped the fixed route portion. It's far better service, and you get to see where the riders are. With the fixed routes, you're driving a bus around a route on a time looking for passengers. With the on-demand, the passengers are the one that dictate when you're traveling.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's the riders and the residents that are deciding your service, not somebody sitting drawing maps and schedules like me.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, and just pointing off that question, I suppose. The needs in Beaumont are to connect to the airport and the city, right? And so Beaumont is still easier to get around than Leduc, although it's starting to get harder the farther we sprawl. And one of the things that we hear often is that, it's not feasible to get from one corner to the other walking if your mobility is challenged in any way, right? So bolting on that on-demand piece, would be a valuable part, but I don't know that we're gonna have funds for all of it. So, yeah. Okay, thank you for the answers.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor, let's keep going with the clarifying non-operational questions. Counselor McCoy Swain, followed by Counselor Penrod, followed by Counselor Telebus. Sam, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to take an opportunity to clarify some of the questions earlier, particularly from Councilor Telebos. So just around the budget. And so they mentioned we canceled the service. So obviously ridership's going to drop. And then the reduction recently is because we cut the service in 50% in order to be able to get there. So that's why ridership is dropping. The other part is Beaumont residents who want to take it aren't aware of what our plans are moving forward. And so you need to commit to a long-term transit for people to be able to make that decision. Okay, I'm not going to renew my parking pass or my monthly parking at X spot. I know that I'm going to be able to rely on transit. And when we cut that 50%, that made a lot of people miss connections, right? And that was really challenging for people. Tough decision we made at that time. Prudent, I would say. I voted for it. But now, because we wanted to get into the spot where we are now, where we have this fabulous report in front of us. The comment I also wanted to make around, Ring Road, and I totally understand what you're trying to do, because we hear a lot, Councillor Van Newkirk talked about, it is getting harder to move around Beaumont, and, if you've got a vehicle, sure, you can get around. Not everyone has a vehicle here in Beaumont, and I know you know that. And that's where that on-demand piece comes in. You're going to see our transit really, really increase. Can we do it this year? We'll talk about it at budget, but I think we're well aware now that our community is changing, and we need to be able to provide services for everyone. The question that I had, and this is going to go down the rabbit hole, so I'll leave Mr. Wong to tell me to get out of it, but we stop right now. The bus stops in Edmonton, right? It takes 8 seconds or whatever to pull over and pull up. But the feedback that we constantly hear, particularly to Councillor Barnhart's point, is for those who live on the south side or down the hill in Beaumont, it's too hard if you don't have a vehicle to get up to the Ken Nickel. The ability to add a stop or to start the system down the hill somewhere, like, help us just understand we can't just park anywhere, right? Like, it needs to be a designated spot. So have we thought about that? I know we haven't asked you to think about that, so if the answer is fine, but is there a way to find a space on the south side, or does that make those connections, those 40-minute connections too challenging?
I think we can work with Kevin to figure out whether there is a feasibility to add a stop at the south, and what is the most convenient way to get back onto the route. So probably I cannot answer that question today.
Yeah,
but
totally
yeah,
fair.
definitely we'll work with Kevin together.
Yeah, I just think, to help kind of the down the hill folks to be able to figure out a way. I don't know where you'd do that, but yeah, I won't. I'll leave it there.
Okay.
So I see there are other clarifying questions. So
Yeah, let's not do too much debating, guys. Councillor Penrod, you have the floor, followed by Councillor Telebus. Philip? Oh, hang on, I had your mic on there. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. I think I've heard a version of the answer to this question, but just picking up on some of the comments and questions of my fellow councillors. It seems to me that we have the opportunity to essentially develop or redevelop our transit offerings in Beaumont almost from scratch here. And so looking for your wisdom, hard-earned wisdom around, if we can't build it all at once, what would be the foundational piece that would provide a solid stepping stone to build ridership and to start to move the needle on developing and changing those habits within our community. What I'm understanding about transit is that if you wait until you really need it to build it, you'll never really get there. And so just if you could share your wisdom and advice from not only the experience in Leduc County, but I assume that you're in communication with other communities that are doing this work, and what are some of the emerging best practices?
Good question. Every community is different. Depends on what they're looking for. For example, there's a community in Ontario, Innisfil, where they decided at the start to not go with fixed routes, but use an Uber model. Over time, they found that the cost of moving to Uber was far more than the fixed routes, so they had to make a whole bunch of changes. Cochrane, I believe, they're predominantly on-demand service. Everybody's looks like they're switching to on-demand mixed with fixed. So it all depends on what service. Now, currently you have service that runs from Beaumont to Mill Woods. My recommendation would be to expand that service, wait and see how that goes, and then look at on-demand moving forward. It doesn't have to be all at once, but again, that's ultimately your choice in budget.
Got to start somewhere. You're good, Councillor?
One more question, maybe. How significantly would it impact the cost projections if we went with some form of a modified on-demand that essentially was just a feeder service, a shuttle to Ken Nickel, so people could book their on-demand to arrive on time to Ken Nickel to take the connection to wherever from Ken Nickel we're offering service?
Another good question. Essentially, it would be the on-demand model that we presented. The only real change would be how many buses you want and the hours of service. So that would, impact. So if you want one bus that's doing those pickups, that costs less than two buses. And if you want, 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, that also impacts. So having just a shuttle, you're essentially asking for an on-demand service, just different version of it.
Yeah, and if I
Quickly.
could take one more, just curious if you have any experience working with other parallel organizations to augment your transit offerings in Leduc, organizations like Drive Happiness, for one example.
Yes, we don't have agreements in place, but we do have people that need to go into Edmonton for medical reasons. Our paratransit doesn't go leave our city boundaries, and our commuter service is only peak periods. So unless they're taking the service to the airport and then connecting with 747 and the LRT to get to their location. So we have a list of phone numbers that my admin assistant passes on to anybody that's looking for transportation options that's outside of what we can provide. So it's not an agreement we have, but it's, we're pushing them into other transportation modes.
Thank you very much. And I just want to echo again the appreciation that's been offered for your collaboration and working with us to bring this essential service to our city.
Thank you, Councillor. One more question. I'm going to call for the motion. Nathan, you have the floor.
Perfect, thank you. So I guess I'll start off, I'm a bit of a numbers guy, so I will clarify more so I guess towards Councillor Monkoff-Swain. Yes, I did mention 2023, we did reduce services by half, so that's accounted for. But 2022 was a full year of service and there was a significant reduction in ridership just based on this report here. So I just want to clarify that so that everyone's aware of that. Second to that, again, writing into these numbers, I appreciate Councillor Van Nieuwerkerk's comment on in regards to budget, and we have to be real with ourselves as well. There is a feasibility aspect to this, and we have to determine what's most appropriate for our population to obviously service them appropriately, but to make sure we're making appropriate fiscal decisions. In that, I think is just important that the general public understands some of the limitations that come with some of these things. So I think just for a little bit of clarification in terms of the on-demand service, is there traditionally a circumference where that ends? Is it meant to be more local within the community and shuttle you around the community? Or can it extend to other regions, potentially eliminating the need for something like commuter services?
My recommendation would be to stay within your community. The further you go out, the more buses you would need to meet that demand. Our zone for Leduc Transit is quite large. It's all of Leduc and Nisku all the way up to 25th Avenue. So, you know, at certain time periods, we only have one, maybe two buses on the road. So if somebody's booking a trip from South Leduc into North Nisku, that bus is pretty much taken out of service for anybody else that's trying to book a trip. So the further you expand, the more you need to compensate.
Perfect, thank you. So just to clarify, based on your experience, independently, they would not work separate from each other to get out of the community. You would need either the commuter, which exists now, and then the on-demand would serve to get you, I guess, to a commuter stop so that we can get you out of the community. You would need both to get from point A, B, C within the community, and then point C outwards would be your commuter service.
Well, we can also, the one option that was brought up was looking at running the ring road as well.
Okay.
So that's more
Okay.
work that I have to.
We're kind of talking about different models now. It's not part of the report. So a very quick clarifying question. I'm going to call for the motion. Move this debate along. Anything clarifying?
I will just, with all due respect, Mayor, I think it's important that before we vote on something like this, we provide the general public with a clear knowledge as to the differences between them.
And we'll vote at budget. We'll vote at budget on this. It'll be a budget debate at budget.
But we just won't have the expertise we have right now. So
I'm sure we can make some kind of arrangement.
okay, as long as we can do that, then
Thank you.
sounds good.
Okay, I'm going to call for the motion now. On the debate, thank you. Oh, CEO Schwartz, you wish to weigh in?
To address Councillor Lamos's comment about exploring models, we were given a specific direction voted on by council to explore these models. Are there others out there? There's infinite amount out there. So what I suggest is we look at, during budget, we look at the models that we have presented. If council's not satisfied, then provide direction to us to explore other ones. So that's from a process perspective.
Thank you for helping me clarify. My answer wasn't as good as it should have been. That was a better answer than I gave you. Thank you for that, CEO Schwartz. With that, I will look for the motion. Councilman Gosselin, I believe you're prepared to make the motion.
I will, and forgive me, last bit of budget posturing, I promise, because I will make the motion, is
Quickly, please.
sorry, I just can't let the comment go. So 2022, yes, drop in service, but just to clarify, the bus used to go from Beaumont directly to Mill Woods, right? And then when we changed that, it went from Beaumont to Heritage Valley, had to get on another bus and then go to Mill Woods. It added significant ridership time. I stopped taking the bus because of it. I know a lot of people did. So now this connection is the direct shot into the LRT moving forward, but I'll make the motion now.
Yeah, no more
Matter of it.
debating.
Yep.
Motion or we shut it down.
All right. I will move that the November 28th, 2023 report, sub-regional transit presentation be made public and included as part of the 2023 council budget agenda package, subject to any mandatory redactions required under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Thank you. Questions from council on the motion, not the report, the motion. Seeing no questions for the motion from members of council. All right, council, would you please vote on the motion before you? That passed unanimously. Thank you, council. Gentlemen, thank you for your time this evening in our closed and open session. As mentioned before, the report was very well done and very informative, helping council make good decisions at debate during the budget. Thank you very much. At this time, it's 7:47. We normally have a short break. Mr. DeBlanco, thank you for being patient. I'm going to bump you again to after. All right, thank you, Ms. Sharma. We are back live again after our short break this evening. We'll continue with our agenda, and I apologize, Mr. Blanco, we bumped you twice tonight, but now guess what? You have no place to run, no place to hide. We are now starting with 7.1, third quarter financial report. Mr. Blanco, you have the floor, sir.
All right, not an issue. Good evening to the mayor and council. I'm Curtis DeBlanco. I'm the director of finance for the city. Tonight I'll be presenting the quarterly financial report for Q3. This report's intended to provide council with an interim update on as well as provide forecasts to the end of 2023. With that, we'll turn our attention to page 2 of attachment 1, and this summarizes the municipal operating budget. The municipal operating budget is that which is supported by taxes, and these fund services such as recreation, protective services, and road maintenance. Looking specifically at revenue, and as of September 30th, administration's forecasting to see an additional 470,000 of overall revenue. This increase is driven from increased usage of recreation, the facilities and the programs, better recovery on billing, as well as some increased investment income. This is offset by some negative variances, including franchise fees, which is forecast to be 3.6 below what was budgeted. Looking at the expense side, the city is forecasting to spend 51.1 of the 52.3 million of the budgeted operating expenses. We do see some large variances at the department level. However, overall operating expenses are forecast to come in within 2% approximately of the approved budget. There's some bigger variances in finance as well as CAO office. What we're seeing from that is being driven from the large one-time projects for the ERP system, as well as the service experience office, respectively. One-time startup costs for each of these are funded from reserves. So therefore, this doesn't contribute to the net operating surplus we see at the bottom of the page. These projects are likely to carry into the 2024 budget year and beyond. Operating expenses in recreation are forecasted to exceed budget by 239,000. And what we're seeing is the main driver for this is staffing at the pool at the BSRC. Increased usage of the aquatic center has required additional staff be in place to support the demand. An increased allocation for staffing dollars for these programs has been incorporated into the proposed budget for 2024. And what this will do is support the demand and also avoid the variance we're seeing in 2023. Infrastructure department's forecast to be 292,000 over on operating expenses. These additional costs we're seeing are driven from a variety of factors, but include escalating repairs on fleet and maintenance, fleet, equipment, and facilities. The next section, the bottom section of that page, which is transfers. For that, what we see is a net surplus before transfers of $1.6 million. However, since the majority of the underspend on expenses pertains to one-time projects that I just discussed, draws from reserves for each of these will not occur in 2023. The stage and work completed on each will determine ultimately what's transferred from reserves in the year. Administration expects to draw approximately 650,000 from operating reserves and contribute 3.9 million to capital reserves. This net transfers will contribute 1.3 million dollars towards reducing that 1.6 million dollar surplus down to the number we see on the bottom of the page, which is 285,000. Looking overall and looking at the change from what was forecast in Q2, at Q2 administration forecasted a deficit of approximately $500,000. What we've seen is forecast swing in the other direction towards a surplus of what we see at the bottom of the page is 0.3 million on the operating budget. The two largest contributing factors for the swing have been increased permitting revenue within development services, as well as a lower forecast for personnel costs due to either vacancies or just the timing of the budget being approved in April. On personnel specifically, the city does offset potential surpluses in personnel vacancies by discounting, only budgeting for 97% of overall staffing costs. And as of September 30th, administration's forecasting a utilization of 95% on personnel costs. Like I mentioned before, these savings are partially driven just from the timing of the budget and hiring subsequent to that, as well as just a normal level of turnover within the organization. Within the report itself, there includes a looking back on 2023, specifically the items that were funded as part of the 2023 budget. Administration has included a quick update in the report on each of these items. I'm not going to go through each of them individually, but I'll highlight the leased office space as it pertains to a recommended budget amendment for the space. The acquisition of additional office space has been secured, signaling a significant milestone in the city's need for office expansion. With the layout finalized and construction tender packages in progress, administration is rapidly advancing towards selecting a contractor by year end. Construction is scheduled to commence early 2024, targeting occupancy mid-year, which will provide a dynamic and innovative workspace to meet current and future needs of the city. Included in attachment 2 is a project profile for leasehold improvements for the space. Requested for council approval is a capital project to be added to the 2023 capital budget. Total cost for the project is $635,000, which would be recommended to be funded from government transfers. What we see on that project profile is an expected spend of $60,000 in 2023 and $575,000 in 2024. On utility operations, and that is page 3 of attachment 1, utility revenue is expected to come in slightly below budget, approximately 0.3 million. And what we're seeing is based on consumption data, customers are averaging a use of 204 cubic meters of water per year. And this is a drop from 2022, which was 213. The additional usage in prior year was really driven from work from home policies that we saw from 2020 through 2022 and a little bit into the start. What we've seen for 2023 is that the average consumption returning to pre-pandemic levels. This reduction in revenue is offset by a reduction in fees paid to the water and wastewater commissions. Overall, what we see is that the utility operating budget is forecasted to come in right at budget. Administration, if there is a surplus, will recommend that the surplus be transferred to the utility reserve. And if there's a deficit, it would be drawn from the utility reserve. Looking at capital, as of September 30th, 41% of the approved capital budget has been spent. However, it's expected that 86% of the capital budget will be spent by the end of the year. These numbers exclude these large projects, the Beaumont Innovation Park and Joint School Site Assembly, which is included in the capital budget. But since they are large and have very small forecasts for them, to look at the rest of the budget, that's what those 41 and 86 numbers are. For certain projects not completed by year end, it's likely administration will request that budget funds be carried forward into 2024 to complete. Detailed updates on the individual projects were included in tonight's agenda for the Q3 capital projects update, so I won't go through them individually. Overall on renewal, the city's renewal programs are expected to be completed with an overall savings of 8%. The savings that would come out of reserves for these, that's allocated to these programs, would remain in the reserve to fund future capital renewal. Looking at growth, excluding those 2 projects I mentioned earlier, the city is forecasting to see a savings of $1 million on growth projects, most notably on the cancellation of permanent rink shack, as well as the Russo school site. Next page, which is page 4, which is the reserves table. Or sorry, page 5 rather. The operating budgets will require draws of 0.7 million and 0.3 million respectively. This amount is actually 1.2 million less than the approved budget. On the capital side, 5 million of a budgeted 5.6 million is forecast to be required to fund those capital renewal projects we just mentioned. Looking at forecasted closing balances, the financial stabilization reserve is currently forecast to have a balance below the optimal guideline within council policy, which is 5% of the prior year's municipal operating expenses. That's 2.5 million. The 2022 year-end transfer from this reserve of approximately 900,000 to offset the city's operating deficit has reduced this balance below this level. The transportation renewal reserve is forecast to be below the minimum balance of 2% of tangible capital assets, although this balance is forecast to increase beyond this level in the next year. Noted in the report, there are other reserves that do not currently have the balance or annual allocations forecasted to meet the renewal or replacement of assets forecast in the 10-year plan. Administration will be undertaking a significant review of reserve planning in 2024 and may recommend an increased allocation to these reserves in a future budget or a reallocation between reserve balances to bring each of them to an optimal level. Lastly, just overall on the operating budgets, should the city incur any operating deficits, a draw from a reserve would be required to balance the budget. Should the city incur an operating surplus, administration would recommend the surplus be transferred to an appropriate reserve. In this scenario, the most appropriate reserve would be the financial stabilization reserve. At the time of the presentation of the Q2 financial report, administration iterated its intent to reduce the forecasted $500,000 operating deficit as best as possible while still maintaining service through focusing on reducing expenditures and finding efficiencies, hoping to not require a reserve draw at year end. Focus continues as the forecasted surplus at Q3 is 285,000, which is very tight, representing approximately 0.5 of the total budget. That concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deblanco. Appreciate that. Very informative as it always is. And it's a slight surplus, but it's a surplus nonetheless. It's razor thin, but it's 285,000. So appreciate that. Any questions from council on Mr. Deblanco's report? Councilor McGough-Swain, you have the floor first, followed by Councilor Penrod, followed by Councilor McCook, followed by Councilor Van Newkirk. Sam, you have the floor.
Thank you. First up, I know I've grilled you guys a lot to be able to provide information in advance, a look back to look forward. This is exactly what I was looking for. So thank you for doing that. I'm hoping this saves us a lot of time at budget. I've got a real good sense of where we're at with 2023. So thank you for doing that. This really helps me moving forward. My only feedback would be, you know, if we could somehow incorporate this into the budget package for as we move in next year, so that we don't have to ask a lot of questions that are related to this week's the written questions. So if we could somehow figure out a way to include this as part of that package, that would be helpful. But fantastic job. I'm just going to quickly hit on the leased office space to try to help us get to tomorrow. So a couple of things. We have some people who are very interested in what's going on in the city, and before I even had a chance to look at it, that the comment was, how can we put a budget item in front of us? Like, if administration's already secured the lease, how can that ask go in front of us? So I won't ask you to get into that now. I'm assuming that you want us to save all these type of questions for budget when we go through that capital item. Is that correct?
Yeah, thanks for the question through to Councillor Munkoff-Swain. Reason this is here tonight is because it is a 2023 budget item, as opposed to a 2024 budget item.
Okay, so just to clarify, and apologies if I got that wrong, you want us to address this tonight?
The recommended motion is in the report. The amount is there for the full scope of the project. There is an amount forecast for 2023 that administration is asking to be approved.
Okay, sorry, I missed. Sorry, then we are gonna spend a good chunk of time here. I'll leave it to my council colleagues to ask the specific questions. Yeah, but thank you generally on the report. It's absolutely what I was looking for. Hitting into budget tomorrow, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod. Philip, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. So I'm just going to start with some detail stuff because I like to dig around and surface this stuff. So I'm referring to page 39 of your, pardon me, that's 39 of the overall agenda. I'm just looking for the page that would be on your report. Anyway, it's the heading Protective Services Level of Service Consulting. I just was curious to note that there would be presented to council a report December 13th, 2024. Just curious if that's a typo. Wondering if that report is 2 weeks out or 58 weeks out. Typo? Okay. Thank you. And another curious question. At the top of that same page, you talk about cost being effectively only budgeting for 97% of the overall staffing costs. And my question is around how those two numbers, the 97% and the 95% there, how they stack. So are we saying essentially that we've spent 95% of the 97%, so around 92% of our total budgeted personnel budget for 2023?
Thanks for the question through to Councillor Penrod. So I'll answer it separately, but the city budgets for 97% of what the total FTE complement would be.
Yep.
95% is what we're forecasting to utilize of the entire staffing complement, not 95 of the 97, 95 of the 100.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to forge ahead here with this question. You tell me if it's onside or offside. So related to the motion that's in front of us tonight, just looking for some color on where this is located, what departments might be expected to locate there. And if you can tell us, just thinking in terms of telling the story to the community, how will this improve morale and or use of public assets by the public? I'm mindful of, there's this question that came today around parking at this facility, that we compete, staff that are based here compete for parking with patrons of the library. So does that give you enough to go on?
Mr. Blanco, see, Schwartz wants to jump in before you proceed. Mr. Blanco, Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And I'll give you a very high level response. And then what I'm going to suggest is that we move this item to budget and that we don't debate it tonight. We defer it and then we could get into more details. But in a nutshell, this will provide us with about 45 more additional office spaces. Right now, we don't have enough office space for our employees, even though we have a hybrid work program. So what we've done is leased where our current seed office is. There is a vacant building attached right next to it where they will paint stories to be. Can't think of the name of it. So we've leased that space. We've come up with a design that would give us 45 more work spaces, including meeting spaces, quiet spaces, and all of those other requirements. This point in time, HR, accounting, finance, HR, and who else? And IT will be moving. Right now, they're in different places all over, but we can get into more details of that. The 625 that's being asked, 60 of that is needed to complete the design work. And I think we've got a conceptual design that we could share. So I'll certainly send that out to you.
Okay.
Mr. Penrod?
I think that's it for me. Yep, thanks.
Okay. So Schwartz made a suggestion. However, I have 3 more counselors with the questions. So I'll go to clarifying questions first, and I'll go to Madam Clerk for some advice on how best to proceed. Councilman Cook, you're up next. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Most of my questions surrounded the lease space and some of that was covered. So just thank you for the reports. I always appreciate that there's an immense amount of work that goes into these financial statements. So I appreciate the clarity of the report as well, and look forward to discussing this tomorrow.
Thank you, Councillor. Councilman Newkirk, Steve, you have the floor, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Steve?
Yeah, I'll start with the lease space, just a question in that ask, because it's fresh right now. There will be more tomorrow. In the 2023 budget, we had $126,000 that was approved for corporate leased office space. For clarity, is the 60 ask in this new, in addition to the 126 that was approved in the 2023 budget?
Thanks for the question. So the amount that's approved in the 2023 budget pertains to the operating side, whereas this would be the capital side.
Okay.
So to answer your question specifically, no.
Okay, and so this is a new money ask out of 2023.
That's correct.
So there, in the 2023 budget, there wasn't 60,000 put aside for this?
No, there was not.
Okay. Okay, I'll leave the rest for tomorrow. That's fine. We'll chat about that some more. Sanitary dump and eco station design. Thank you for the update on that. So the capital project update is entitled, as with the 2023 budget, sanitary dump and eco station siting and design. The update is concepts are complete with design and siting underway. Completion of the design is planned for late 2023. I asked the council clarifying question about this, so I'm bridging into tomorrow night and I can bring this up tomorrow night, but the question is, or the answer to the question I asked, it said to clarify. The scope of the design efforts for this project only include the design of a recreational RV sanitary dump station. An eco station was not included in the design scope. Maybe we should go back and look at that, what was approved and what is presented, and then what the answer to the question was. There's some conflict there, so maybe I'll just leave that for you now and I'll dive into that tomorrow.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, we can
Curtis?
follow up with,
Just clarity on,
The department.
what was approved, and what the title is versus the answer to the council clarifying question, because there's a conflict there right now. Sure. Okay, thank you. That's it for tonight, Mayor.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Councillor Barnhart. Kathy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much for the detailed information. I'm sure you realize that coming just the day before our budget committee is made it all the more interesting when we're looking at the budget and looking at the details of how last year's or this year's budget is going. I get lost every time in the reserves, and I try to understand it and then think, well, maybe I just don't have to work so hard at it and just take it on faith. But then, no, my constitution doesn't allow me to do that. So I guess the question I'm asking is, during the course of the year, can the administration move money out of reserves without going to council? Or is that only decided at budget time or subsequent motions to council? Subsequent reports to council?
Thanks for the question, through to Councillor Barnhart. So administration only moves money between reserves that are approved by council. At the end of the year, whether there's an operating surplus or operating deficit based on the approved budgets, administration then comes back and requests either council to approve the transfer to the reserve or draw from the reserve. And in some cases, we'll recommend reallocation. If one reserve is potentially overfunded and another one's underfunded, there may be a recommendation from administration to move funds between them.
Okay, I'm remembering past years, the financial stabilization reserve was used a fair bit during budget time as a way of councils looking at, if we don't have the tax rate we're looking for, we look at the financial stabilization reserve as a go-to place. And that seems to have really changed. We have a lot of reserves now, and reserves are more specifically allocated towards certain parts of it. And I understand where that's going, but it is difficult now to try to figure out where things have gone. What made me think about this, and I know I'm rattling a bit here, but did we agree at council at budget time last year in 2023 budget to put the service experience office, take that out of reserves? Was that from day one we agreed that's where it was coming from?
So the entire project, the one-time components of the project were funded by reserves. The ongoing portions of the project, so the every year cost of that program being within the municipal operating budget, is funded by taxes. So only the one-time startup components of that project are from reserves, and then the ongoing operating costs come from taxes.
And is that the way we deal with everything that's startup? Or just that was proposed, this is the way we were going to do it in 2023?
That's a budgeting best practice, to align one-time revenues with one-time expenses and ongoing revenues with ongoing expenses.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay, I appreciate that. And in the past, we've used reserves for transit. Was that again startup of transit, or was that, do you recall, or is that even not something you would have off the top of your head? You might have to look that up. I do know we went to reserve at one point for that.
I believe the startup of transit might have predated me, but the intent upon startup was to phase in the total cost of transit. So I believe the original plan was to phase in transit over 3 years. So fund approximately, I'm making up numbers here, but approximately 50%, and then 60%, 80% until the full cost of transit was on the tax levy. 2023 is the first year that the total cost of transit is on the tax levy. Prior to that, reserve transfers ranging from approximately 400,000 to 165,000 were made each year to partially offset. It's not an ideal budget practice. That's why it was recommended for a few budgets to take that reserve transfer away and have the entire cost of transit funded by the tax levy. But yes, you are correct that that was partially funded by
And
reserves.
so just to be clear, council has that ability to direct the administration to use reserves for operating as well as for capital.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. See, Councillor Telebas has his hand up. So Nathan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, thank you for the report. It's obviously very informative. And as mentioned by fellow councillors, really important for us to determine path forward. Just running through this reserves, it's a little worrisome from what I'm reading here. Would you say it's fair to say that we're underperforming in terms of reserves? I see that we're not meeting a lot of the recommendations. I know there's mention of administration taking some steps in the future to help increase some of this allocation, but is this something that we should be concerning? Well, obviously we should be concerned about, but what are some of those steps that we plan on taking to build up some of those reserves?
So first thing we'll go back and look at 2023. Within the 2023 budget were resources for financial analysis. So we have those resources now, and a big chunk of their work in the upcoming year is going to be looking at these long-term financial models. Reserves is one. We did consider including in the proposed budget an increased allocation in reserves for the reasons we see on that paper. But what we did want to do is, before we recommended an increase to reserves that would be funded by taxes, was that we make sure that we've done the adequate work to ensure that the number that we're putting forward is solid, that we're confident that through better reserve modeling that the number that ultimately comes to council to be funded from taxes to contribute to reserves is a adequate number that has a long-term forecast tied to it.
Okay, thank you. I guess just secondary to that, and you kind of touched on the modeling side of things, but would we say this is more of an allocation concern from previous budgets, or this is us using reserves when potentially we didn't have enough funds within the reserve to meet recommended guidelines?
On the capital side, it's certainly an allocation, making sure that the allocations going to the capital reserves are adequate to fund the renewal and replacement forecasted in our long-term plan. We've done a improved job in recent years on long-term capital planning, particularly on replacement. On the second part of the question on particularly around the financial stabilization reserve, it's not ideal to fund a lot of one-time projects that aren't say being done in the spirit of financial stabilization. A good example would be snow clearing, would be a reason to use the financial stabilization reserve. So if there's a heavy snowfall year where our costs to deal with the snow are beyond what is in the operating budget, that would be a solid use of the financial stabilization reserve. And, you know, on the flip side, if it's a low snow year, if we could contribute back the variance between what's budgeted. It's really in place to deal with unforeseen events. I believe back in 2020, we were one of the few municipalities that didn't recommend amending the operating budget due to COVID. The guidance was we're going to put forward an operating budget just like any other year, and if we do see a deficit, we would draw from that financial stabilization reserve to offset.
Perfect, thank you. And I guess I'll ask you to look into the future. My last question here, you had mentioned the snow clearing, and obviously we haven't seen much of that. Is that something where we can anticipate in the last quarter that potentially, if things stay like this, we could see that financial stabilization reserve increase?
Yes, correct. Indirectly from snow clearing, but if our forecast for snow clearing comes under for the reasons we're seeing outside right now, that would contribute to the overall debt or surplus that's projected at the bottom line. So yes.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor. See no further questions. Madam Clerk, There are two recommendations in the report, one to accept the report's information, one to do the transfer from reserve. Suggestion was made to move the report to budget, so I'm not sure if we moved the report to budget. We still received information, do we not? We should not do the both motions on the recommendation report, please, your advice?
Mr. Mayor, it depends on what council would like to do. You can simply just postpone this item until tomorrow's meeting. And that would just allow council to deal with the funding for the lease. You don't have to receive the report for information, so we could leave that recommendation. It's fine. It's just a recommendation. So if council wants to deal with the funding matter tonight, it may, or council can opt to postpone it to tomorrow. It's council's discretion.
Thank you. That's why I was sort of assuming you'd say that, which is okay. So I'm looking for either a motion. There's two motions on the recommendation of the report. I'm looking for a motion to adopt this report as information or move it to budget. Councilman Swain, do you wish to address this?
I'll take a different point here and recognize the request to move to tomorrow. My personal view is, you know, we need to move forward with this. Administration needs it. So if we can save time during the next 3 days in budget to deal with it now. I know there are some questions that were deferred. So my personal view is of it, and maybe it's a straw poll, which is always dangerous, but I'm prepared to vote on that motion now, I guess is how I'll frame that. And if it saves us time today, we could maybe address it now, but it depends on how many questions people have on the item itself.
Okay, just clarify myself, what motion, proceed as information or move it to budget?
I would move both motions to receive the information and to provide the budget, the capital budget that they need for the lease. So that's just where I'm coming from. And
okay.
I think, you know, since initially I didn't have enough information in the report, but when the CAO explained what it was for, where it was going, that was enough for me to get there. They need the space. So, you know, I don't want to get into debating the motion, but I'll be prepared to move both.
I guess Steve willing to speak. Let's go to Steve and see what's on your mind. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, excuse me. The further questions that I had on the additional one pager that was brought tonight were answered by CAO Schwartz tonight. You know, sure, I have a couple more questions I can ask, but they're just detailed questions. They're not fundamental to the ask.
Okay.
So, you know, timing tonight versus tomorrow night really doesn't matter in the big picture. You know, but you know, if we get to it tonight, if you'd like that, we can, and if not, we can put it to tomorrow. So I'm really indifferent, but the information questions that I had, they're detailed and they can wait. So yeah,
okay,
it's up to you.
So two are comfortable waiting. Both of you are comfortable waiting. Okay. Any further discussion? Well, let's have a motion to start with. Let's put a motion on the floor. We can figure out how we're gonna move forward. Sam, you have the floor.
So we'll just caution us on the motion, because if the motion gets defeated because they want to move it to tomorrow, that's what I'm nervous about, and waiting a whole year and all that sort of stuff. So that's why I was looking for more of a
perhaps some clarification or assistance from Madam Clerk or CEO Schwartz, make sure we get it right, or at least the intent of right. Madam Clerk, your mic is on now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So if we have a motion as recommended in the report, council can debate that motion. If another member of council feels it should be postponed, the postponement would take precedent. So we would deal with the postponement motion first. So Councillor Munkoff-Swain, are you willing to move the recommendation that was in the report?
Thank you for that. This is why we have you here, to save us. So I'll maybe let me see if we could deal with the second motion first around moving the lease.
Sure, we can remove the receive for information because we're taking action. So it's non-consequential. So we can just deal with the meaty part of that motion if you're willing to make it.
Yeah, I'm prepared to make that.
Okay, we'll take a second here and get our ducks in a row and get a motion on the floor. Sam?
So I'll move that an amendment to the 2023 capital budget to approve the Centreville Leasehold Improvements Project in the amount of $635,000 to be funded from government transfers.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion? Do you wish to speak to it? Is your
Sure.
motion-
You know, obviously this, we heard from the CR around where this is going to be, so that clarified my questions. It's no secret that administration is bursting at the seams. They're working from home, all that sort of stuff to try to come out. And if we can get them in the space, the reality is we need this. Would we prefer to have a bigger space? Sure. But I'd rather address it now. It is coming from grants. And, you know, we've got $11 million roughly of grants, you know, after, if we approved everything that was in that budget. So there is room there for this. And
Sam, sorry, this is just on the motion to move the funds on the reserve on the Centerville, right? There's two motions here, just the first one. You're talking more about the office space, which is not really this motion. Am I missing something?
sorry,
Okay, maybe I'm missing something. If I am, I apologize.
we're not doing the receivers information. So this is the office space. Centerville leasehold improvements, office space is how I read it.
Sorry, I was thinking of something else. My apologies. Sorry.
Okay.
Been a long day. I apologize.
No, it has. So I mean, fundamentally, to Steve's point, there are a lot of things we could ask questions in and out, and we could, you know, spend a lot of time at budget tomorrow on it. But fundamentally, we need to do it. I'd rather get it done now.
Yeah.
That's the ask, and so that's why I'm putting forward the recommendation to try to address it tonight.
Good, thanks. I was having a brain fart there. It's one of those days. So I apologize for the interruption, but it's clear to me now you were on the right topic and I was somewhere else for some reason. So discussion on the motion, members of council. Questions, discussion. Oh, sorry. I am Councilman Telebas, followed on Councilman Cook. Nathan, you have the floor.
Perfect, thank you. So just to clarify, if we're putting this forward, we are asking to vote on it tonight as opposed to tomorrow.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So my concern here is just looking at this, and again, I might be in the wrong spot here, but the leasehold improvements are showing for 2024 based on the document provided. So would this not apply to our upcoming budget, which would be tomorrow?
My understanding is going to come from the 2023 capital, sorry, it's coming from the 2023 capital, not capital, government transfers in their 2023 budget. Mr. Blanco, can you clarify for Councilman DeBellis?
Sure. Yeah, and I understand the confusion from the page. The motion itself is asking to approve the entire scope of the project. What we're seeing on the page is the forecasted spend for 23, which will carry into 2024. So what we'll end up seeing, should the motion be approved, is that an amount of $635,000 would be added to the 2023 capital budget. And that what we would expect to see is the residual amount that wasn't spent in 2023 be carried forward into the capital budget. Separate process from tomorrow and beyond, but this is a 2023 capital budget item.
Okay. Yeah, is this my opportunity to discuss some of the concerns? Okay, so
you have the floor.
All right. So although I do appreciate it, I do appreciate that we need office space. I'm all about planning and having a plan in place. If we forecasted a budget of about 60,000 and now it's tenfold that amount, it's something that concerns me. And I think it's something that should be considered as we consider our budget of the new year of 2024. So although it may be something that's needed, I think it's something that we should look at in 2024. So I do have concerns with just going ahead and approving a 600 and some $1,000 investment. So further to that, I just have questions on the lease itself. So is this a long-term lease? A couple of questions here. Is this a long-term lease? If so, how long? Because there's a lot of factors in here, such as furniture. What would we do with it after the fact if it is short-term?
CEO Schwartz, just to make a comment.
Couple things, and I'll answer the questions as well. This is not an over budget item. Council approved some operating money, annual operating money to pay for a lease. So we've gone ahead and secured a 10-year lease with a 10-year option. Each time you lease a piece of property, you need to retrofit it. So the $635,000 is to pay for the FF&E for all the furniture, the effects, and the renovations that need to be done to that building. From a 10 to 20-year perspective, we can't build a building and furnish it for that kind of money. The reason the 635 is being asked in 2023 is we want to start the project and keep it going. So by funding it up front right now, we estimate we're going to spend about $60,000 between now and the end of 2023. But really to spend that money and then not spend the following 575 the next year it's a waste of time, right? So what we're suggesting is 635, we'll carry over 575, which will be spent in 2024.
Thank you. I just one more question for clarification. I know that we mentioned we're busting at the seams in terms of office space. Is the hybrid model not working for us currently?
CEO Schwartz?
Yes, that's correct. We use a hybrid model. You can work from home and up to 3 days a week. We also have hotelier stations for folks that are staggered, but we are still grossly underprovided space for our employees. If you have a look upstairs, you'll find people literally working in what used to be storage areas and busting at the seams. We've had employees that we've hired that have never been to work because they've had to work from home. This will give us a combination of hotel and desk spaces and meeting spaces.
Thank you, Counselor.
Just one last question. Have we looked at converting existing city-owned facilities, such as maybe a meeting room within our rec center or something along those lines so that we could save a little capital?
CEO Schwartz?
Yeah, we looked at a number of options. One of the first things that you learn when you build space for community groups is if you take it away, you're going to hear about it. So the idea of the BSRC is busting at the seams. The rooms are rented. So we did dangle with the idea of doing that, and none of us were brave enough. So kidding aside, this we believe is the most cost effective, and we went through every option we could possibly look at in the city to be able to find this space that requires some update. Took a lot of work, and I think we got pretty lucky.
Thank you for the responses. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor McCook, followed by Counselor Barnhart. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think mine's more just a comment. I think this really kind of underscores the importance of getting to that like long-term planning and figuring out what our long-term plan is for the city and all of our growth, because I think it's it's important that we look at that and get some sort of plan down. And I know that's coming, but I think this piece just really highlights the need for that to happen sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate that. Counselor Barnhart. Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. I just want to say this is not a new problem. It's a problem that's been just building for many, many years. I think staff have been practically sitting on top of each other in this building. So it's good to see there's a solution. Just a bit of a surprise was when we saw it come, especially this week. One last question I have is the government transfer. Is that pay as you go? Or is that grant, some other source?
Thanks for the question. The question came through in the counselor questions answer. What administration does is once the entire capital budget is approved, we go through and allocate them to the most strategic use of whether it be pay as you go, MSI, or Canada Community Building Fund. So once again, we'll look at that and pick the most appropriate funding source, but it will come out of that pool.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Seeing no further discussion. Sam, one final comment before I call for the vote. You have the floor.
Yeah, I'm not sure how correct this is, but I want to make sure if there are people who are choosing to vote, I'd rather to vote no. And if we don't have the numbers, I'd rather someone put a different motion in front so we don't defeat the motion. So I don't know how we can casually ask that question, but defeating the motion really puts this whole thing back.
So you mean vote but not vote?
Well,
Kind of a straw vote, kind of a heads up kind of thing.
I'll let you manage that. Yeah, if we defeated it, you're gonna come back a year, right? So.
Okay. All right, well, that's a good, Madam Clerk, thank you for interjecting.
If I may offer some assistance, if there's anyone who would like to put a motion to postpone, if they have concerns about addressing this matter now, this would be the time to deal with a motion to postpone. It would take precedence over the motion on the floor, so.
Excellent. So
That offer-
procedurally, we can do a postponement motion. If that gets defeated, then this wouldn't be voted on and we wouldn't wait a year to have things happen. So thank you,
If
Madam Clerk.
someone
But we
wanted.
only need to make that procedural motion if they don't think that they've got the votes.
Okay, so at this point, I guess I'll entertain potentially any motion to postpone. And if I'm seeing none here at this point.
Okay.
All right, Sam, one last comment. I'm going to call for
No,
a vote on the
good.
motion before us. Think we're good? All right, council, seeing everyone had a chance to speak, council, would you please vote on the motion before you on the screen? I have 6 in favor, 1 against. Motion carries. Thank you, council. Oh, actually, all councilors except Councilor Talabas voted in favor. 6-1 in favor. Thank you, council. Madam Clerk, that was your question, I'm assuming. Thank you for your light being on. Appreciate that. So the next question I have is then, do we accept the report's information or postpone the report to budget? Or we don't need to do that, do we? We've now got this taken care of. Thank you. Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you, council. Next on our agenda is 7.6 motion following notice, Councilor Telebas, additional dwelling units. Oh, sorry. I apologize. 7.5 was taken off consent. I forgot that. I had my thumb on the wrong number. So we are now at 7.5, update to council policy 3C38. I'm having one hell of a day, aren't I? I didn't cross off my C's. So we're at 7.4, community standards bylaw, construction waste. You said 7.4. You said 7.4, right? Okay. So it wasn't me. Okay, I'm going to get this right now. Stop talking, everybody. 7.3, traffic safety bylaw, loud vehicle noises. All right. Who can speak to this from administration? Mr. Melvin, I'm assuming it'll be yourself. All right, and your microphone will be on in a moment there. Hang on a second, I got to find the right one. Mr. Melvin, you have the floor. The microphone is on.
Yes, good evening, council and members of the public. Jim Melvin, Director of Protective Services. We're bringing back a report based on our analysis of the motion that was brought forward in April to address loud vehicle noise. We did, as in the report, detail on what we received for data. Out of the roughly 504 calls we received for traffic concerns from the public, 13 were related for loud vehicle noise, and of those 13, 4 complaints under the traffic safety bylaw and 1 under the community standards bylaw. During the same time, from January 1st to October 16th, the RCMP did receive 2 complaints for loud vehicle noise. 93% of these calls were 50th Ave and Range Road 241 during early mornings and evening hours. And 7% of the calls were received from the high school during school hours. So we did look at this. It is a very small percentage based on the amount of activity that municipal enforcement does within the community. Other areas of the traffic safety bylaw and the community standards bylaw. We did look at some options that would possibly facilitate in front of council. We could either collect a full year of data along with a communications campaign and installation of some traffic signage in those specific areas to remind operators of the vehicles about noise levels, and or council can direct administration to research and prepare amendment to the appropriate bylaw, and the details on some deliverables are mentioned in the report. Obviously for option 1 can be covered in the 2024 operating budget within municipal enforcement. Option 2, based on our current staffing model, we don't have the staff appropriate to include this program within our current mandate, and the costs associated for the funding of an additional FTE along with equipment and equipped vehicle is detailed in the report, and these costs have not been included in the 2024 proposed budget that you'll see this week. So option 1, no real risk. We collect another year data to determine if it's a perceived concern or it's a real concern. And option two, as you're well aware, there are some known challenges for enforcing vehicle noise. We have to be in the right spot at the right time. And we need to develop some further research to see what the draft bylaw amendments are developed. Administration recommends that option one is our best option and utilization of our current budget within ME and protective services budget for 2024. Open any questions that council has pertaining to this report.
Thank you, Mr. Melvin. I appreciate that. Councillor McCook, did you want to speak first? But you did pull it off the consent agenda. Would you look prepared to speak first? Councillor McCook, followed by Councillor Natelovas. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief Melvin. I understand this is obviously difficult to enforce because you obviously need to be there to catch people. You have complaint data listed. Can you provide any information on how often officers have gone out to 50th Ave and Range Road 241? Have they spent any time around that area? Are they catching people? Are most allowed vehicles related to speeding? Can you provide some information on that?
Through the mayor to Councillor McCook, we did spend a specific time responding to those complaints in that area, 50th Ave and 241. I know on one occasion the RCMP spent 2 hours out there and received 0 violations, other than running some stop sign violations. We have proceeded out in that area, and we're actually getting more commercial traffic violations north of 50th Ave on 241 rather than any type of noise. But once again, by the time somebody calls in and we respond out there, obviously they're gone, or vehicles are operating outside of our normal working hours where we don't have any officers on call.
So that's probably part of the problem is we don't have bylaw officers that work late, correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor McCook, obviously if people are leaving for work at 5 and 5:30 in the morning, we don't have officers on that early unless we're enforcing any part of the snow removal program that normally starts at 6 a.m. And right now with the amount of staff we have and our shift model, we can't cover 12 and 18 hours out of every day to offset those early mornings and late evenings when people are coming home.
Okay. In option 2, you called it a program. Can you speak to the program, I guess? It states 150K for new program and vehicle. So any equipment to measure sound or to deal with any of that would be put into a specific vehicle?
The equipment that would be required is obviously the FTE for the community peace officer, the vehicle that the person needs to be in, and then the sound equipment and the training that would come with it. That would be out of that 15K for sound meters, decibel meters, the certification required to get that, and the training piece behind it as an upfront cost.
Okay. And then to purchase kind of sound equipment and get people trained on it and go from there is not an option.
Through the mayor to Councillor McCook, we did not add that option as a program enhancement because other programs we wouldn't be able to focus as much time on it because we're spread pretty thin as it is.
Okay, thank you. Couple more questions, Mayor?
Please proceed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Option 2 states that there are known challenges with enforcing. Obviously, the major known challenge is kind of being there when it happens. Can you speak to some of the other challenges that come along with implementing changes to the bylaw regarding this?
Through the mayor to Councillor McCook. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges is going to be that right place, right time to be in there. Another challenge that we do have is when residents call in and witness it, encouraging them that if they want to be a witness, that they would have to go to court and we'd be able to do it that way. So that's another challenge of disrupting that. There's still a lot of unknowns. We know what the city of Edmonton proposed this year. We haven't seen as of yet what challenges will come out of any type of case law that may be around in that. But once again, it's right now, our data doesn't support me pushing forward any type of financial impacts on the 2024 budget that would cover this new program enhancement. It may in the future, but right now the data does not support putting resources towards it. Not that we're not going to deal with it if we get a call on it, but to specifically have a program designed to do this, other than what's already outlaid in the Traffic Safety Act, Rules of Road Regulation, and the Traffic Safety Bylaw.
Okay, thank you. I think, I think exploring the options of raising fines and everything like that are, it's an option. I'm not sure what good it does though if we can't really catch or enforce them. I think some of the feedback that residents have heard is that we can't enforce it because we have no way of measuring the sound either. So even if we are there, we cannot enforce it. Am I correct in that statement?
Through the mayor to Councillor McCook, obviously, we do not have any sound equipment to enforce any type of decibel sound level, but there are provisions in the Traffic Safety Act that are outlined in that report that we can still enforce, and obviously would be debated in court. But for actual measuring of sound noise, we want to make sure that the resources that we're pushing forward is weighted on what the concern is for the communities.
Okay, so if we are there and there is a vehicle that stomps through the sign and screeches down 241 and it's extremely loud, we do have ways to enforce it without saying we have to measure how loud that was.
Through the mayor to Councillor McCook, yes, there's as detailed in the report, there's provisions within the Traffic Safety Act, Rules of Road Regulation that we can enforce in the event that we catch somebody speeding or doing burnouts, which we have done during this year. We have ticketed violators who have breached the Rules of the Road Regulation and the Traffic Safety Act.
Okay, thank you. I guess, and potentially you feel the same way. I guess I'm just at a bit of a loss here as to kind of how we move forward and how we help residents of that area that are fed up. I guess complaints and the data we have for complaints are one thing, but I'm not sure that people who hear loud vehicles are calling in every single time. I certainly encourage people to. I last night was sitting at my house and I could hear extremely loud vehicles at about 9 p.m. I'm not sure how we tell people that we just can't really do much. I'm not sure that signage is the answer, because I don't know that people really care about that or pay attention to that if they're focusing on that, unless you have some data or some experience from other jurisdictions who have put in signage and who have seen some positive effects to it. But otherwise, I'm just not sure. At this point, I'm okay for now, Mayor. Just kind of absorbing. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 4 more speakers willing to ask questions or, sorry, Councillor Telebus, followed by Councillor Penrod, followed by Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk. Nathan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess just kind of touching on a few things that Councillor McCook had mentioned. Is it fair? I think it's reasonable to say that under the TSA, although there are subjective fines that can be applied, it is very hard to enforce, especially a noise level currently under the TSA.
Through the mayor to Councillor Telebus, we do not have any sound decibel meters to record sound decibels within our current equipment fleet within municipal enforcement.
Correct. Thank you. I guess just going back to that subjective as opposed to objective, as you're referring to, it just states excessive noise. So given that, it would be a judgment call for an officer to apply that fine if they so choose to.
Through the mayor to Councilor Telebus, obviously the officer has the discretion on the roadside. If he believes that is an excessive noise and it's worthy of a violation, then our officers will issue that ticket and it'll be brought to court.
Okay, perfect. I do like one of the proposals there. I think education is critical. Obviously, there's some people that just aren't willing to comply, but I also think a lot of people just are potentially unaware of the issues that they may cause. In terms of the education campaign, as the first recommendation, what would be involved in that or communication campaign?
Through the mayor to Councillor Natellenbos. Obviously, we would work with our communication team on what the best avenue is to get that information out to the community. It's really a kind of a shift in culture and an awareness, and I don't want to come off as I'm discrediting that it's not a concern or it's not valued. All I'm saying is that based on our current resources, we don't have the ability to add that program and to efficiently make it work. I don't want to bring in something and then don't have any resources to do it because then we may have a concern where residents are, well, we have this and how come you're not doing anything about it? The communication piece is a vital thing, and we're constantly doing that on the roadside through our current campaigns when it comes to noise, even on the community standards bylaw, when it comes to loud noise on people's properties, abiding by construction on weekends, what those timelines are. We're constantly out there educating the public and contractors that bring forward any type of concern. So we're doing the best we can, but once again, we're in if people don't let us know what the concerns is, yes, we have proactive patrolling, but we only have so many staff in the city's fairly large, and we're trying to get to everything as quickly as possible. So there is challenges with that.
Perfect, thank you. And I guess one last comment / question. I'm a strong believer in photo radar enforcement in areas where it's high risk, things like school zones, or if you're purposely causing a disturbance. There have been quite a few pilot projects involving units called noise snares. I guess first question, are you familiar with those unmanned systems?
Through the mayor to Councilor Natellenbos, we are aware of them. We haven't explored them as a technique. I'm a firm believer that face-to-face interaction with motorists is the best way, and don't want to come off as just being a revenue generator, as sometimes the perception of photo radar is.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'm a strong believer of that too. It shouldn't just be a revenue generator, but if there is a known issue and it does affect the general public, I do see some value in something like that. So I guess just a note to maybe explore something like that, should this continue to be an ongoing issue.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod. Nathan. Philip, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. Pardon me. My fellow councillors have sniped most of my good questions, but I do have a couple others. You mentioned, sir, that you're a firm proponent of face-to-face interaction with motorists as far as enforcement and education, and I can appreciate that. I'll just say I'm also a firm proponent of face-to-face interaction with our residents, and I can tell you from spending hour upon hour upon hour this past summer in the neighborhoods of Triumph and Forest Heights in particular, the concern in those neighborhoods for this particular issue, loud noise, especially overnight, when you've got folks either working early shifts or night shifts, sleep is being disrupted, children's routines are being disrupted. There's the safety concern. People told me things like they're just waiting for the night when someone comes off that road and through a back fence because of the speeds that they're observing back there. So I just want to reiterate that this is a real concern. And I think it goes far beyond the 13 calls that have been made. I think there's a problem in neighborhoods that happens with our reporting that when neighbors start to talk to neighbors and say, I called, nothing happened. I called, I got the answer that, there's nothing they can do because they don't have the proper equipment to enforce this or the proper manpower to enforce this. And people just stop reporting. But the frustration remains. And so that's, I think, some of the passion that you're hearing tonight, that's where that's coming from. So I do echo Councillor Natellenbos's suggestion for noise snares. I thought actually a resident gave me that idea this summer, and I thought, hey, we might actually be able to make some real headway on this. But I wanted to ask, how does the provincial freeze on photo enforcement programs impact your ability to manage the issue? Like, are your hands tied with deploying some of these types of equipment?
Through the mayor to Councillor Penrod, we have not gone down the route of noise snares as an option. We are kind of handcuffed when it comes to any type of new areas. As you're well aware, any new areas is still not approved, delayed for another year. This does not preclude us from school zones, construction zones. We can still, as your community grows, so as you know, as Russo builds up and as school becomes active, we can easily put down. We just need to go through the proper channels in coordination with the RCMP and the SolGen to make sure that the site is approved and they're aware of it. So those can be done. When it comes to the traffic, the noise snares, we would have to reach out to the SolGen to see if that is within that envelope. That would be permissible under what we're permitted to do within the ATE program, but it's something definitely that we can easily get some information on, report back to council.
Thank you. And I do hear, and I also observe from your report, the recommendation. I can tell that it's not that you're minimizing this particular complaint. It's you're working with the limited resources that you have, and you're tasked to deploy those resources to kind of triage community need, if you will, and deploy those resources in the most kind of effective area. So I just wanted to come back to that recommendation in option 1, that we work on a communication campaign and installation of traffic signage. I wonder if we've thought about signage. I know we're seeing them more and more, including several places around Beaumont. Those signs that monitor speed and just flash as a reminder what speed you're doing. And oftentimes you see the brake lights go on for people that you're following. Would there be such a device that we could look into that would measure noise and give people a friendly reminder that way? And if we were looking at something like that, would it be helpful for us to look at a bylaw amendment that would give some direct guidance for the levels of noise that are allowed?
Through the mayor to Councillor Penrod, we can look at every option that's available to us. Nothing's really limits us, only our imagination on what we're able to do. Any type of enforcement or regulation that would require a bylaw amendment, I would just talk to our folks with legal to make sure what we're doing is actually legal and provide some effort. If we can get some good data out of it. Once again, I'm going to lean on my communication folks to within the municipality to find out what's the best approach to get that messaging out. Like I said, we'll do whatever we can with the available resources that we have to get messaging out and advise people on the concern when it comes around vehicle noise, loud noise, just in general, and how disruptive it is.
Thank you, Councillor. Are you good?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warner, followed by Councilman Newkirk. Kathy?
Thank you,
the
Mayor. Thanks, Chief Melvin. This is a tough one because I think we've all heard the calls, and I, for one, and I know several other councils as well, have actually heard the vehicles and can almost tell what time it's going to be in the summer because it seems to be same guy or same gal doing it, which after a while you get complacent about it. You think, oh, well, that's just them again. But it's not okay when you have to get up at 5 a.m. to go to work or something like that, or have a baby that gets woken up. It's more than annoying. It ruins their quality of life and their desire to stay in our neighborhoods and in our city. But I also appreciate we don't have an easy solution here. What I was wondering about is the signage and perhaps traffic calming or anything else that can be done. I think you've heard a couple of ideas, and it's not our place to be telling you what's available out there because we just hearing it from different residents, but wondered myself if there was some way that we could get further information because it's desperately underreported. We know it is, just from our own research. You say in option 1, you're going to collect another full year of data along with a communication campaign. So I don't know if you have any specific ideas about that now, but I don't think it's just a matter of, you know, no speeding or slow down. I think it's also about letting people know that noise is a major factor here. Any further details on that communication campaign or data gathering?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bernhardt. Once again, we haven't sat down with our communications folks on forecasting what that plan will look like in 2024. It is on their radar, and I'm quite confident that we would put messaging that would be more than just a flyer in your mail slot or just a reminder on a social media piece. We need to put some meat behind it on the reason why this messaging is going out. It is part of the campaign that as our officers are out there interacting with drivers and residents, that here are some avenues, and you know what, we're willing to address residents' concerns, but we need to know about them. Right, we can't go on with the assumption. We do a proactive patrolling, but once again, with the amount of officers that we do have the road, the city is fairly big, and calls do come in that we may not get there to right at the moment. So it is definitely a challenge. Once again, this is not an easy thing to fix, but we just want to make sure that we're not wasting any resources and we're not giving a false assumption that yes, we're going to address it, but we don't know how or we don't have the resources to do it. We need to make sure we line everything up when we have appropriate resources to write communication plan, and we're able to put that plan into effect.
Thank you for that. I look forward to seeing what comes back if option one gets passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councilor Newkirk. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Lots of questions and passion on this one tonight. I kind of expected that if it came off the consent agenda, but being one of the 13 that has picked up the phone and called this in, I think that if it's this big of a concern, there should be 86 or 112, not 13. So I implore everyone who has a concern with this to get their cell phone out of their pocket and call it in. I have a hard time deploying more officers and resources to an area based on 13 complaints. So doesn't mean it's not there, because I know it is. I'm one of the 13. The other thing is that what we know, and everyone in this room knows, is that if things are noisy, it's because you're speeding. We got radar guns, and we have a way to deal with that already. There's nothing new and exciting associated with that. Chief Melvin has answered a lot of questions here tonight, and thank you for that. And my experience has been anytime that there's been passion on an issue like this, Chief Melvin has found a way to get to the bottom of things, and I'm confident that happens again. When he needs more resources, he'll come and ask for them, and you know, doing what he can with what he has is what he does. So that's all I have to say tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further members of council willing to speak, I will move the recommendation, the report. Madam Clerk, could you put the recommendation on the screen, please? I'll move things along here. We can get into the motion here on the report. I move that option one is set out in November 28, 2023 report, traffic safety bylaw, loud vehicle noise be approved, and that administration report back to council by end of 2024 on the number of complaints regarding vehicle noise. I will speak to my motion briefly. I think it's the most viable option of the two in front of us at this point, and I will simply make that motion on the floor now. Questions from members of council on the motion? Seeing no questions from members of council. Thank you, council. Oh, Councilor Telebus. Nathan, you have a question?
Yes, my apologies, Mayor. I just, in that report, is there any way that we could explore maybe one of those other options that we had mentioned, which was that noise snare, just adding that as a component of that report, just so that we get a slight idea as to whether A, it's something that's enforceable, and B, something that holds merit.
Chief Melvin, is that a possibility from your comfort zone with that request? Thumbs up is good, so I will amend the motion as Madam Clerk is assisting. Madam Clerk, do I need to reread the entire motion or just the added words to it? What procedurally do I need to do? Thank you. I will redo the motion that option one is set out in the November 28, 2023 report, traffic safety bylaw. Loud vehicle noise be approved and administration report back to council by the end of 2024. The number of complaints regarding vehicle noise and information on other options, such as the use of noise snares for enforcing excessive traffic noise. Thank you. Council, discussion on the motion, on the amended motion? Seeing none, council, would you please vote on the motion before you? That carries unanimously, 7-0. Thank you, council. You have anyone coming later, right? Yeah, thanks. All right, next on our agenda here is community standards bylaw. Nope, not 7-4, 7-5. Updated council policy C-38, supporting artistic and cultural expression. Madam Clerk.
I'll be serving double duty for this one, Mr. Mayor. So
Thank
I'll
you.
be presenting the report. I'll keep the comments very brief. As council will recall, they directed a number of changes to the council committees, including what's now called our Arts Advisory Committee. One of the changes related to making those updates that came out of the review was making some amendments to the cultural arts policy. As part of the work that administration conducted on that policy, we sought legal advice and a legal review, and we brought that report to council on September 26th as part of a closed session because we were receiving legal advice. There were quite a few changes made to the policy, but generally speaking, what I can share in open session is that we wanted to make sure that the policy aligned with council's sphere of jurisdiction and that the language was appropriate and clear. So the funding of the 1% remains in the policy, but the language around the 3:1 ratio between recreation and arts, which had been the cause of some unease and confusion in the past, was clarified in the updated policy. So both policies are available. And if council is willing, we can have council approve the amended policy as was presented with the one change regarding the 3:1 ratio that was directed as part of that September 26th conversation.
You have the floor.
Thank you. And Ms. Bujaya has gone right to the heart of my comment, which is basically around the 3:1 ratio. And just to be, kind of bringing back where that came from, the arts community, as we all know, has been growing over the past couple of years, and we've seen some amazing outcomes from the contributions that council and the city has made to the arts community. I appreciate that we've gone from the 3:1, which is very specific, to the more general, but it almost strikes me as being so general that I just, not necessarily wanting to change the wording, but I'd like to ask the administration a question. And the question would, and I know Mr. Suter's not here, but maybe Ms. Bujaya, you can, or perhaps Mr. Schwartz can give me some assurance that there's going to be recognition of that funding growing to increase to meet the needs of the arts community. And the 3:1 was definitely an intent to recognize how out of balance it was between the arts and recreation. And last time I looked, it was still a fair bit of difference between the two. Specifically, I guess the question I would ask is, how is the administration going to ensure that the arts program continue to receive the financial support that it needs? And subsequent to that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe the Arts Council, which is in place until the end of December, received any request to give input to this change.
Thank you, Councillor Barnhart, for the questions. They're really good questions. So I'll start with the easier question. No, the Arts Advisory Council was not consulted on the update to this policy for the simple fact that this is council's policy. Council establishes its council committees. Council is also responsible for anything it sets in policy and meeting any requirement it sets upon itself in policy. And therein lies the difficulty of the former language that we had in the previous policy. When council sets an obligation, whether it's by bylaw or policy, then there's an expectation that we will meet that. And some of the difficulty around the previous language was that it wasn't clear what was meant by recreation spending and how do you differentiate recreation versus cultural versus artistic spending. So based on the advice that we received, this was the best option to put forward. So this is where we had landed with the policy. We did explore other options that were discussed in that September 26th closed session, but because of some of the difficulties and some of the legalities around some of those options, this was the option that we understood was preferred at that time.
It's just further to that, Mayor, Ms. Pujaya, will the administration bring forward annually, I would assume at budget time, a compilation of what is currently going to the arts programs in our city? Is there a way of doing that so that we have it in one place? We know whether we are growing that pot or whether or not. I mean, I agree that 3-to-1 is too specific, but if it's splintered and we don't have it all in one place, it's going to be difficult to follow that. So I'm just wondering if there's any ideas as to how we might be able to keep an eye on this in the future. That may not be a question. I may be putting you in a spot there because I know that's a financial type question.
Madam Clerk?
I'll try my best. So I unfortunately can't answer that question as completely as I would like to. However, council always has the authority to ask for a report or to direct a report. So I would ask that perhaps that be a follow-up question for Mr. Suter. And certainly there will be opportunity to discuss that when we discuss recreation and cultural funding as part of the upcoming budget process. And then if there is a need to formally have a motion directing an annual report on cultural and artistic spending, we could deal with that as a subsequent motion to the budget. And I would be happy to work with you, Councillor Barnhart, if that's an avenue you'd like to pursue.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And Mayor, I'll be voting against this for the reasons that I specified. It's not as specific to the continuing growth of the arts programming as I'd like to see.
I appreciate that. Any further discussion on this item before I go to the recommendation that's in the report? Seeing further discussion. Madam Clerk, could you put the recommendation from the report on the screen, please, to be moved as a motion? Thank you. Member Council willing to move the motion, or I can myself, and no one else wants to put forward? Councillor Penrod. Bill, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. I move that updated policy C38 supporting artistic and cultural expression as set out in attachment 1 of the November 28th, 2023 report be approved.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to speak to the motion, or you're prepared just to make the motion? You can speak to it if you want to, or you're okay.
I just wanted to maybe ask my counterpart, Councillor Barnhart. You were asking in one of your last questions about specific reporting. I see in point 3.3.3, the city, it says the city will provide annual reporting describing its financial support for arts and culture. Is there something that could be more specific there that would alleviate some of your concerns?
Councillor Barnhart, do you wish to quick reply back?
Appreciate that, Councillor Penrod. In my mind, that the way I read that, the reporting is after the fact. And what the previous clause allowed for was that it would direct the administration to ensure that there was additional funding in a relationship with the recreation funding. So I'm looking at something that would be more prescriptive rather than reporting, but I appreciate what you're asking. And I honestly didn't, I didn't think that there'd be support to put it back to the way it was because I was part of the previous conversations. But the more I looked at this, the more I realized that I think we're moving away from increasing the arts, increasing support for the arts, which is what this policy was intended to do. And we're not there yet. I didn't want to stop where we were going. I think we do ourselves a disservice not to increase the funding for culture and the arts in our community. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod, you're good. No further questions from members of council. Appreciate that. So council, I will call for the vote on the motion on the screen before you. Councillor Barnhart. Sorry, it is not registering on my screen. That's okay. I assume the buttons are getting old and tired. That motion carries 6-1. Councillor Barnhart in opposition. Again, 6-1. Thank you, council. I appreciate that. Next on our agenda this evening is 7.6. Motion following notice, Councillor Telebus, additional dwelling units, taxes and fees. Would you please make your motion, councillor, when it's on the screen? I'll put your mic on for you. There you go.
I would like to make the motion that by the end of January 2024, administration prepare a report on any possible options for enabling the city to collect fees from properties with additional dwelling units for the use of municipal services for things such as facilities, infrastructure, general services, and that the report include information on how the city ensures equity between various ratepayers in terms of fees for municipal services.
Thank you, council. Please speak to your motion.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. So I want to clarify a couple things. What we're talking about here are obviously additional dwelling units, which are additional living spaces for individuals within a given residence. Just over the past year, so over 2023, we've seen an increase, a 30% increase in one single year of these additional dwelling units. The motion's not an attempt to put anyone at a disadvantage. In fact, its purpose is to do the opposite and have a more fair and equitable distribution of taxes across the community. So as mentioned, just running into some numbers, currently Beaumont has either in the approval phase or completed 120 additional dwelling units, which based on the average size of a family would bring in about 360 individuals. These individuals are using our facilities such as our rec centers, they're using our roads, they're using our fire services, they're using our peace officer services, our policing services, I could go on. But obviously, as individuals use these services, it comes with a cost. Currently, there's a very minimal way to collect additional revenue from this, and it's just based on the property assessment of that house. By applying additional fee to these individual residents or additional dwelling units, we're able to make sure that we capture at least a portion of revenue that helps cover all of these services and infrastructure that will continuously need to be upgraded, and serviced.
Thank you, councillor. You're good for now?
For now, yes. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Even if you were done or not. So I have two speakers at this point besides myself. At the end, Councilor Goswami, followed by Councilor Barnhart. Sam, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Bill, and thanks for bringing forward the motion. A couple of questions here from me. I guess the big concern I have is the latter part of this motion. So I'll get to that in a second. But the front end, the concerns I have around this, a couple of reasons. One, we're trying to promote affordability, and this is an option for that. And I know where you're going at, but I think it's counterintuitive to what we're trying to achieve here. And the second part of that is my fear is if we put these fees on, that people are just gonna hide this and do it without it and avoid the fee. So, but to avoid Councillor Van Newkirk reminding me of my constant commitment to be okay to get information, I will be voting in favor of that first half because I want to see the report back and give the respect for that process. But the second part, I really struggle with. So I want to vote for the motion, but to ask how the city ensures equity between various ratepayers in terms of fees for municipal services, like to me, that's really dangerous and potentially divisive. I don't know how administration is going to answer that. So I'd ask two things. One, and maybe let's speak to that a little bit more. How can you judge who uses what roads, who uses transit, who uses the rec center versus the community center versus all that sort of stuff? So I think that just puts in a, I think people are going to narrow, like to me, we're a community and, at some point, we all pay for different various things and that's how we move forward. So I find that very challenging. So I'd ask two things for you to consider here. One, take it out completely. I don't know what that achieves. If you're not prepared to do that, I'd love for you to even break that up into two motions so that I can help vote for it on the first motion and then the report to include information, maybe even a second motion, and then I can vote against that. So I just stating my position. If not, that's fine. This is your motion. I would vote against it because of that second part of the motion if it stayed in there today. So just stating my points.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I go any further, Councillor CEO Schwartz, you have a comment on potentially the timeline in the first line of the motion. Mr. Schwartz, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm curious on why it has to be the end of January. It's a very busy time right now, and I would ask Councillor Nettleton-Moss to consider the end of Q1 2024 for the first half of that, whether you split it or not. I'm really not sure what the second half looks like, quite frankly. I don't know off the top of my head any possible way that gets done. We regularly speak to our neighbors to the north and to the south, and we have flowing back and forth, people going to Beaumont to use the city of Edmonton's facilities and vice versa, and Leduc City. And yeah, I don't know if anybody's ever come up with a system, put those types of tracking mechanisms in place, but we can certainly look at it. But I would not offer that the end of Q1 would be more appropriate for us, or we'll have to juggle some stuff.
So Councillor Telebas, why don't you digest that suggestion while I go to Councillor Barnhart and Councillor Newkirk for their comments on your motion, okay? Thank you. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk. Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. I was looking at our strategic plan to try to give my thoughts some balance here, because once it gets past 9 o'clock, I start to turn into a pumpkin. But honestly, this motion makes me nervous because it speaks to collecting fees that are not taxes. I don't know what they are. There are other kind of fees. We already have a whole list of user fees for facilities and infrastructure and fines, et cetera. So to then say, if this particular home residence has more than a certain number of residents, there's additional fee, then my brain goes to, well, what about families that have 6 kids or versus 2 people living in a house? We haven't regulated how many people can live in one home. We've left that to families to determine the size of their family. So this is not inclusive to me. It's discriminatory. I would wonder about condos and duplexes. Are we talking about them as well? And I guess the other part of it is if you start charging fees for services, you also have to look at reducing taxes or fees, whatever you want to call them, from properties that don't get the same service. And we've had that come up before, cul-de-sacs and snow removal and condo areas. So to me, this opens up a huge can of worms. And I don't think it's the solution to the problems we're looking at. I think the idea of how we solve the problem of people living together in close quarters and parking, et cetera, I think that's another way to look at density and how we deal with that. So for many, many reasons, I won't be supporting this motion. I appreciate why it's come forward, but I don't even support us spending time on developing that report.
Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate that. Counselor Van Euker, followed by Counselor Penrod, followed by Counselor McCook, and then maybe myself. We'll see if I get a chance to talk about something. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. You know, what I would say here is, there's a notice of motion on the floor. If the motion passes, administration's gonna do their best to respond to it. If there are challenges or they're unable to respond, they're just gonna let us know. Right? So, that's how that part goes. For me, there was some increased desire from members of the community during the recent by-election, surrounding taxation of additional ADUs. And I understand many of the reasons why we might not want to do this, with the main one being that those costs or fees are probably passed directly on to the renters or lessees. I get it. That's a simple argument. There's no hard concept to that. But tonight, for me, I'm going to support the motion because I want to be able to have the information at my hand. There are people in the community who adamantly believe this should be a thing. If we don't have the information in our hands from this report, how are you going to respond to them? There are going to be people that come and say, this motion was put forward, why didn't you support it? I didn't support it for A, B, and C. Sure, but now you don't have the information at your hands to be able to respond in a wholesome way. So that's how I would respond to it. Whether or not I agree with it or not is secondary to having the information for me. So, it's important that the outcomes of the report are available for those within the community who have the concerns and they're asking the questions. It's less about agreeing with it for me, more about getting the information, having it on hand. There are people in the community with these concerns. If administration has a tough time answering or quantifying something, they'll tell us. That's what they do. The section will be short. So that's where I come from. So I'll support this in that spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Penrod, you're next. Counselor, followed by Counselor McCook. Philip, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. Just talking through my own thinking on this, I'm happy to hear that a couple of my colleagues twigged to the last part of this motion. I wondered if it smelled right to me, and the fact that some other people, something tweaked for them in some of the language there, lets me know that there is maybe a problem there. As a community that's working hard on doing better with equity, diversity, and inclusion, I think we want to pay attention to things like that. I was troubled by some of the community conversation happening during our by-election around this issue. And like some of my fellow councillors have said, I'm generally in favor of more information, right? Two things that I think are important as we head towards a vote on this motion, however. One is that our current process for levying taxes that pay for all the services that Councillor Natellenbos has mentioned here already takes into account, the current process already funds those through an assessment. And the properties that have additional dwelling units, we trust, would be assessed higher. They're more valuable properties. So it's already baked into the current formula, would be my response to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk's question of how am I going to respond when that question comes up? That would be my response. Second, I think it's important to remember that different than inquiries for information, councillor inquiries, which have no cost to the administration or to the municipality, as I understand it, when we make these notices of motions and direct work to be done or studies to be undertaken, that does have a cost. And we don't necessarily tally it up, notice of motion by notice of motion. I'd be actually interested and curious to know what an average notice of motion ends up costing the city by way of generating that report and the work that's done by various people, and also the opportunity cost of work that is foregone in favor of work that has to be done now because the councillor has directed it to be done through a motion in order. And so for all of those reasons, I would back up half a step and just say, I'm leaning towards voting against this motion, but I think some viable ways forward have been put forward there. Councillor Natellenbos, if you'd like to amend your motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. I'll go to Councillor McCook, and then I'll have a couple of comments. I'll go back to Councillor Natellenbos. to ascertain the discussion and go from there. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Penrod. I was just going to mention the additional taxes piece. I think Councillor Barnhart and Munkoff Swain brought up some valid points and some thoughtful points surrounding this, and I would agree. I can understand getting some information back, especially as it pertains to the first half. I don't know that I can agree with the second half either. Just as to many of the points brought up from my fellow councillors as well. But I think if we move forward with the first half, it is good to have that information. And then what we do with that information would be to be determined. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will interject a couple of comments as well too. I equally share the concerns with the second half of the motion for reasons already explained by other councillors. Even the motion itself, I have some concerns with. Fellow council already mentioned our affordability objectives, which seems to go against this affordable objectives. It may drive people underground to avoid paying an extra fee. The assessment that Phil mentioned a moment ago was also a concern. My biggest concern at the end of the day is that even if the first half of the motion were to pass and we do a report, we have absolutely no resources to enforce this. At the end of the day, we need people in planning, we need people in other areas of our administration to enforce this report. Report would come back and we wanted to go forward, we'd have to do some sort of a bylaw or rule change to make this enforceable. And we have no resources to do that, not in the foreseeable 1 or 2 years, in my personal opinion. We have other priorities for resourcing of new positions. And I think this would be very difficult to actually enforce something like this. So I'm thinking 2 chess moves down in terms of good for information, yes, but I'm hesitant saying information, yes, but we can't do anything with it. Physically, we don't lack the resources to enforce it. So I'm a little concerned with, I know where you're going with this and I get it. I'm just thinking from a resource perspective, I don't know how we would make this go forward down the road unless we want to increase our budget for extra person to enforce all these rules and fines. I don't know how we would do that. It's just, I don't think it'd be a good use of resources. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Councilor Telebus. If you want to make any changes to your motion or leave it as it is, it's entirely up to you. You have the floor if you wish.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. I do take a little bit of insult, especially when we use just terms such as discriminatory or not being inclusive or not focusing on diversity. That has zero to do with the words that are put forward in this motion. So I will put that forward. It's important to me, we talk about affordability and affordable living, that everyone is given that opportunity in Beaumont, not just these new residents. And when I say new residents, it's what's being built, these new houses, these new communities that have 1, 2, 3, or 4 units in them as a total, as a whole, that are getting reduced rates. And now the burden of tax comes back onto a typical homeowner with a single family residential house in Beaumont. So we talk about affordability, but we have to look at our entire population, not a subset. I'm glad someone brought up duplexes because that's a great scenario that applies exactly to what I'm asking. You have duplexes and both those units are going to pay their tax based on their property assessment. That's currently not the case for these mini hotels that we have in some areas. And some of these are businesses. So it's important to note that too. We have a landlord that is renting out 4 units and they're not paying their fair share for all of the services that the residents within those additional dwelling units are using. So I am more than happy to take off the latter part of this motion because the intention is not to be exclusive or to not include someone or to not focus on diversity. That is not my intention at all. It's to just make sure that everyone that is using our facilities, our services, pay a fair share.
Thank you, Councillor. I think Madam Clerk will help assist you with that.
And Madam Clerk, I'm okay with a date change as well.
That the end of the first quarter was suggested. You're okay, just for clarity, end of first quarter 2024. Thank you, Councillor. I see Councillor Barnard has a comment to make once you're done. Once you're finished, pardon me. I said that poorly. Any further comments at this time, Councillor from Telebus?
No, not at this time, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Barnard, you have a follow-up question?
I
or
do.
thought?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. And to Councillor Natalenbus, when you say collect fees and you bring up, well, we already collect different taxes for duplexes. Fees and taxes are different. And that's what I'm wondering, what you see by fees. That's not through the tax system. That's through some other mechanism. And that's where I have difficulty enabling the city to collect fees for properties, for units, versus looking at opening up how we collect taxes. So to me, I'm having some difficulty with creating a whole new way of getting revenue based on that. So the report itself is not about taxes, it's about fees. Is that your intention?
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Telebus, not a rebuttal, sorry, reply.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Barnhart. No, if we can go the tax route, that's the route that we would go. I just want to make sure that we're exploring all options, should tax not be a possible option. So ideally, yes, taxes would be the approach, much like a duplex. But I didn't want us to run into a scenario where potentially we can't do that, and then this motion is just completely closed. So I'd like to explore all options, but taxes being the primary approach.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions or comments from anybody, I think that was your final comment. Councillor, you're good. Councillor Telebus? Yep. Okay. At this point, then I will ask you to just make your motion one more time officially for the record as it's been changed, and then we'll go to the vote, okay?
Perfect. I would like to make the motion that by the end of the first quarter of 2024, administration prepare a report on any possible options for enabling the city to collect fees, including taxes from properties with additional dwelling units for the use of municipal services.
For example, facilities infrastructure. Okay.
Such as facilities infrastructure.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions or concerns, Council, would you please vote on the motion before you? That carries unanimously, 7-0. Thank you, Council. Appreciate that. We are at 9:47. Our meeting bylaw allows us to go from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. unless the council votes to extend. So I'm going to keep very close eye on the time here. We're getting down to the very end of our agenda. We have Councilor Inquiries, response and updates. And before I go to that, CEO Schwartz has offered, in the sake of time, to send his report to us by electronic mail rather than doing a verbal one tonight. Help us try and get under the 10 p.m. deadline before we need to extend our meeting. So thank you, Mr. Schwartz, on that. I'll get that in a second. But any councilor inquiry responses or reports? None that I'm aware of? None. Thank you very much. CEO update will be sent electronically from CEO Schwartz, and I appreciate that. Moving along on our agenda this evening, notice of the motion. Members of council willing to put forward a notice of motion this evening. Councilor McCook, I believe you are doing a notice of motion this evening. It'll be on the screen momentarily for you. Please proceed when you're ready, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that by the end, at the December 12th, 2023 council meeting, I will move that by the end of the second quarter of 2024, administration provide a report on the feasibility, cost, advantages, and risks of having the city invest in purchasing and operating its own bus for the primary purpose of addressing bus services required for the city's childcare program in comparison to leveraging third-party options.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. Look forward to that motion being brought forward on December 12th. Also, Councillor Telebus, you have a motion for December 12th as well. It's on the screen there for you, and your mic is on.
Thank you. I'd like to propose that at the December 12, 2023 council meeting, I will move that by the end of the first quarter of 2024, administration conduct a review of the C14 purchasing policy and provide a report of possible updates and enhancements, including things such as greater clarity for definitions and more detail on various processes such as requirements to obtain bids, when public calls are required, and the audit process to confirm compliance.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. That'll also be on December 12th as well. Thank you very much. And any further notice of the motion from members of council this evening? Seeing none, next item on our agenda is our closed session, which we've already done. 11.1 was on consent agenda, and that brings us to adjournment at 9:49 this evening. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you tomorrow night at budget, starting at